Honours and privilege and recognition of guests, the Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon and welcome back to my colleagues in here. I hope you had a productive week. And in the midst of your production, got a chance to get a little bit of R&R last week. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin just by saying congratulations to Mike and Jessica Fritz, 82 Great George Street, just across the road from where we are here, on the recent opening of the Gallery, Coffee House and Bakery. Not that they weren't busy enough in St. Peter's and at Founders Hall, but they opted for another wonderful location. I had a chance to pop in there before a question period here today to get a coffee. It was really, really busy. It's a beautiful facility. Juliana Ross is the culinary and pastry chef, so I think good things are in store for the Gallery and Coffee House and Bakery. So I encourage all members, if they haven't already, and all Islanders to check that out. Great entrepreneurs who love all things PEI, so congratulations to them. I also want to offer my congratulations to Dr. Don Stewart from the Cornwall Dental Clinic, Mr. Speaker. I spend a lot of time in Cornwall with my kids, with their friends, with sports and other activities, and to see the evolution of that old building that it's one of the oldest buildings around, built in the early 1800s. And it's been given new life because of Dr. Stewart. I'm sure it would have been much easier and cheaper to tear it down and start fresh, but thanks to his vision and his dedication to the preservation of our history, Mr. Speaker, that what is there today is just a beautiful, beautiful building. And we should always remember in here that the preservation of our history, Mr. Speaker, tells us not just about where we've been, but also helps us outline where we're going. So I want to thank Dr. Stewart and all of those for their kindness and their determination and their vision for the preservation of that wonderful building, and on a job well done. Mr. Speaker, the preservation of our past is also always top of mind when it comes to those in our Acadian and Francophone community, and I was really pleased to read about the partnership between La Cooperative, the Integration of Francophone, de l'Île de Prince Edward, partnering with the New Brunswick Community College to offer a variety of language programs and tutoring, all trying to continue the preservation of that wonderful language. So good work, and thank you to those for that, Mr. Speaker. And finally, today is the last day on the job for Chief Paul Smith of the Charlottetown Police Services, Mr. Speaker. I believe 42 years in policing, a wonderful, a decorated career in that protection of our society and our province. The last 25 plus years as the chief of the City Police Services in Charlottetown, making him the longest serving police chief in the city's history. It is a remarkable career. He's a strong, quiet leader, Mr. Speaker, whose actions speak much louder than his words, and I think he retires from the job today proudly and with a wonderful career of accomplishment behind him. I want to thank him for his service, and I want to wish him best in what comes next, Mr. Speaker, and I hope it's as remarkable as his career has been to date. So thank you very much, Chief. You did a job well done, and good luck to everybody today. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to welcome everybody back, all my colleagues here in the House, to after a week. We left here just a few days ago and it was winter, very definitely winter, and the other side of the equinox, and here we are today and it's very definitely spring, and that's a lovely thing. I want to start by mentioning a number of island students who would have ridden to school today in a quiet, clean electric bus. 12 of them across the province, and I remember when I first brought up the idea of potentially buying electric buses for the school system in this House, maybe 6 years ago after I took my seat here, it was not warmly received, shall I say. So congratulations and thank you to this administration for coming through with the funding to make this a reality, and I understand this is just the beginning of something much bigger. Students, thank you. It's a really wonderful thing, and one of those schools, actually I don't know if any of the buses run to Elliott River School, but if they do, the students there, as part of their Spirit Week, collected, I think, nearly 500 boxes of cereal, and some of you may have seen the video online of them in the gym doing this massive domino display. The cereal boxes were not made for, not collected for that function specifically. It was for the Charlottetown Food Bank, but good for the students and staff at Elliott River School for making that happen. And it's a lovely video if you haven't had a chance to see that. At the other end of the age spectrum, the seniors College of Pei, of course, they were unable, like so many other, are we okay there, Joey? All right. They were unable to continue with their regular programming, but they did a bunch of stuff online for seniors across Prince Edward Island, and the variety of courses was quite amazing, from gardening, photography to Zumba, astrology, craft beer appreciation. I think I know which one would have had the highest enrollment on all of those. Really great presentations available to all Islanders, and if you want to have a look at that, look at the Seniors College Facebook. And finally, a lovely story from the Belfast area, where AJ Matthew Ponopadum and Doug Mackenzie, they first met a couple of years ago, I think, and they both saw the same need, and that's that there's limited housing. Well, we know there's limited housing all across the province, and it's no different in rural areas. And in the Belfast area, they got together, and Doug Mackenzie was concerned about a lack of places for the staff in the Gillis Memorial Lodge to stay. So Mr. Panopadam had just arrived from India with his family, and they spent a couple of months, I think, living in a hotel in Charlottetown, and then chatted with Doug, and they started to build small 1- and 2-bedroom units just across the road from the lodge there in Eldon. And I think they have permits to create 12 of them, with another 12 if necessary. And it's providing necessary housing for the staff at Gillis Lodge, but also for other people in the area. Again, the housing crunch is there for all of us. It's a real win-win situation for the lodge itself, and they're doing some fantastic work down there. I talked about seniors programming at the Seniors College. They're doing brilliant work there at Gillis Lodge in keeping their seniors entertained in this difficult time. So congratulations to AJ and to Doug for this beautiful initiative. I just thought it was a lovely thing of a new Islander coming here with a very established Islander in all sorts of ways and finding a solution to a complicated problem. It's a win-win for everybody. Good for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to be back again today on this lovely spring day, and the weekend certainly brought some spring-like weather, and we're looking forward to a busy week. And as we all can see here, we got our budgetary handout this morning, so we'll have a very entertaining week this week, and there'll be lots of good questions asked on the budget. As I indicated last week, and the weather started to be nice, and it was great to see so many people in my district and right across the province out enjoying the spring-like weather, walking and cycling and so on. Also, Mr. Speaker, last week, the 2021 Francophone Ignition Contest was held, where Donnell Richard and Jake Carone were declared the winners despite strong competition from other finalists. Donald and Jake will now be able to purchase new recording, mixing, and mastering equipment, allowing them to expand their mobile recording studio business. I would like to also congratulate Donald and Jake on their very deserving accomplishments, and I wish them all the best of luck going forward. Also, to the other contestants, congratulations to them, and I wish them luck with their businesses. And Mr. Speaker, I also would like to congratulate Mike and Jessica Fritz on the opening of the new business and wish them all the best going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to welcome everybody to District 19 that's watching today. I had a chance to drive around the district. It was great to see people out doing gardening, or I should say looking at the yards and stuff like that, and getting prepared for spring, so that was a good thing. But today's a very special day for me, Mr. Speaker. Stella turns 3 years old today, my granddaughter, and I get a kick of this little child, the way she says stuff to me and makes comments and twists her face a little bit, so definitely has a place in Grampy's heart, that's for sure.
I can understand
But, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to especially also welcome everyone who appreciates seafood and those in the industry. Mr. Speaker, we are, yesterday in my department, we launched a campaign in Toronto area, the Greater Toronto area, with the goal to drive consumption and demand for our famous PEI seafood. And I'm quite excited about that. We are showcasing the Not Humble video, and we also all kinds of great recipes from the PEI seafood. And these advertisements, we are going over a lot of choice radio stations and TVs, including YouTube and Roku and Apple TV and also Amazon TV. But Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the staff in my department. Also, in cooperation with the Honorable Minister of Tourism Innovation there, his help that he provides our department and this kind of stuff. But our department works very hard in promoting our seafood across the world, and a shout out to them, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise today and welcome my colleagues back from Planning Week and say hello to everyone watching from District 18 Rustico Emerald. And Mr. Speaker, of course, the first round of the playoffs for hockey and ringette is over for many teams across the province. I know my son's under 13 Golf Storm team was up in Tignish, and I got to give the member from Tignish Palmer Road a shout out. I did take the electric vehicle up there, and it might have been a little low on charge, but he had my back. I think we need to make sure we get at least a level 2 charger in Tignish. I made it back to O'Leary and stayed at the Tim Hortons for an hour, got it all charged up. It was all good in the end. But Mr. Speaker, I wanted to thank the coaches from the Golf Storm, and that'd be Jamie Clark, Brendan Boudreau, Hal Affleck, and Kerry Doucette for a great season there. But Mr. Speaker, there were 2 teams that finished their season last week. One of them was the Rustico Rush, was under 14 ringette team. This is the first time a team from Rustico has won the provincial championship for ringette, and so I want to give that whole team a big shout out, especially their coaches, head coach Jason Rendell, and then assistant coach Rochelle Shepard, and manager Laurie Michelin. So big kudos to them for big first. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say it was a hard-fought North Star Old Timers League this year, and you know the Roadkill managed the best of the Raiders in the consolation, but the team I play for, the Arsenault Brothers Whitecaps, managed to defeat the Watertight Whalers 4-2 in the final, and we haven't won that. There's a new cup that Mike Myers put together, and so it was an exciting time up in Rustico way all the way around. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great privilege to rise today on this beautiful sunny day. I hope everyone had a wonderful week off. I like most of you, likely it wasn't necessarily a week off, but it was a nice week to reset and recharge and get prepared for this week. Over the weekend, Mr. Speaker, I took my kids out to Stanhope Beach, and what was going to only be, maybe a half-hour visit turned out to be a 3-hour beach day. So it was really wonderful and beautiful to see that sun shining, and we really enjoyed it as a family, and I hope everybody else was able to take in that sunshine and fresh air. Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition spoke to, it's very exciting times for Prince Edward Island and our school buses. To think that we've electrified 12 school buses is just incredible. Yesterday I had the opportunity to join my colleague, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, along with some representatives from Lions Electric, to tour one of the buses, to go on a tour with one of these new buses, and it brought a smile to my face. Our bus driver was Jason McKinnon. He's the president of the QP Local 1145 school bus drivers, and he is also my neighbor. So I just wanted to extend my thanks to all the school bus drivers out there who are working so hard to keep our kids safe. Also, Mr. Speaker, yesterday it was a little bit bittersweet as I wrote a thank you note to Debbie Langston. Many of you may know Debbie. She was the chairperson of the PEI Advisory Council on the Status of Women, and yesterday she completed her maximum 5-year term with the Advisory Council on the Status of Women. The council did present her with a service award, and Mr. Speaker, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read some of what was offered on the award. So Debbie Langston of Blooming Point has served on the PEI Advisory Council of the Status of Women since 2016 as vice chairperson from 2018 to 2019 and as chairperson from 2019 to 2021. Debbie has inspired council colleagues and staff with her perspective as an immigrant who chose PEI's home, a person who has been subjected to racism and discrimination, a youth worker, a student, and a parent. Debbie's passion for advocacy for Black, Indigenous women of color and her commitment to standing with survivors of violence, especially sexualized violence, have raised awareness and resulted in changes of attitude and behavior for countless Islanders. Mr. Speaker, I have had the great honor and privilege of working with Debbie over the last year in my role as Minister responsible for the status of women. And I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for all of her work, all of her advocacy, her commitment to this island, to island women, and I just wish her all the best, and I look forward to our paths crossing again in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, third-party House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to echo the comments for Elliott River Elementary School. This school continuously, Mr. Speaker, year after year, does things that I think we all should take some pride in, from plastic bag challenge to collecting batteries. And the school lunch program, it was being done at Elliott River long before any government decided that a school lunch program is going to be a good idea. On Friday, the stormiest day we've had in some time, and my wife and I, and along with the Premier, and we're at Cow's Creamery, and it was unbelievable the support that Islanders show to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Well, I don't know how many tubs of ice cream they passed out, but the effort of the staff and the volunteers was second to none, and obviously mental health's on everybody's mind. The harness racing industry, Mr. Speaker, has been going through a pretty rough patch with strangles, and kudos to the government for stepping up and paying for the test of strangles now. I spoke to a long-standing horseman yesterday, and there's a lot of uncertainty in that industry, but I can tell you they're a resilient bunch, and they will come through it. And over the past week, Mr. Speaker, Bill Gaudette, a good friend of mine, passed away on his 89th birthday. Bill, many of us know in the political world, as he ran 5 campaigns for Ronnie McKinley, and he was a provincial chair for Chrétien and Catherine Colbeck and so on and so forth, and the list goes on. He had a little bit of an influence, obviously, of me standing here today in the Legislative Assembly, but to his family, Lola and his daughters, with all due respect, my condolences. And it's tough any time to lose somebody, but to lose somebody during COVID and not being able to share in that is even tougher. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise on this spring day, and I welcome all the people listening from District 13 and the rest of PEI. I rose with a little more difficulty this morning as my wife and I took advantage of the half-price deals offered by local restaurants last night. I can attest to the success of the program, as several restaurants were full already, so thanks to the Minister of Tourism and the industry and their staff for making this event happening. I hope the Minister of Tourism and Minister of Health are planning right now for a future equally successful measure for me and others, so we can lose our newly gained weight when all this COVID business is over. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm not quite sure how to follow that one, but in any event, Mr. Speaker, I'd certainly like to bring greetings to all the constituents in District 6 that may be tuning in today, and in particular, Mr. Speaker, my mother-in-law, who actually resides in District 9, but is an avid watcher of these proceedings. So to Doreen McPhee, hello. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the official opposition spoke about a tremendous partnership down in Eldon between the owner of that facility and AJ Panabadam. And I've had the great pleasure to get to know AJ and his family over the last couple of years since they moved here to PEI, in particular in Stratford. His wife and his 2 young sons, they're just an amazing family. But it was just maybe a little bit over a year ago, he was in the media as well for actually picking up nails along the side of the road and on the road, on the Kepwick Road and the Kinloch Road, as he would take his evening walk. No idea how the nails got there, but Stratford's booming. There's a lot of constructions going on, and so it may have been possible if they just dropped off the back of a truck. But it just shows an example of what wonderful people are immigrating here to PEI and raising their families and contributing to the economic boom here in PEI. Mr. Speaker, also there was some discussion here today. A couple of members spoke about the new electric school buses that have been added to our fleet. It was an interesting time yesterday to go out and not only see the buses but take a ride on a short circuit to see how these buses work. Probably shouldn't have said short circuit. A short route with these buses. But Mr. Speaker, I'm a firm believer in credit due is where it belongs, and I'd like to thank the previous Minister of Transportation Infrastructure, now the Minister for Environment, Energy and Climate Change, for actually initiating this initiative and starting us down this road to electric school buses. Mr. Speaker, so we have 12 in the fleet right now. We have plans to buy another 12 in the coming year, and we have 332 buses total in the fleet, and we're looking forward to the day when we can say we have a completely electrified school bus fleet. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Did I miss anyone? No? Member statements. The Honourable Member from Mallory-Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every week I check into the patient registry, and every day I receive calls from concerned constituents because the number of Islanders without a doctor is growing at a rapid rate. Yesterday, the number of Islanders without a proper access to healthcare providers grew to 16,449 people on the registry. And it's important to remember that's not the full number of Islanders without a doctor, as government has announced that it will not place Dr. Crothers' 3,000 plus panel on the registry. The last minister had 21 months to improve health care, and now we've only seen serious services deteriorate. And that includes addictions, mental health, and long-term care, Mr. Speaker. In a few minutes, my colleagues will raise additional issues about access to health care, particularly mental health. So what worries me now, Mr. Speaker, is that we have a government that's given up on the goal of a doctor for every Islander, and Mr. Speaker, that should always be government's goal. So what other goals will they let slide? And how many compromises are they comfortable with? And how many phone delays and reassigned services to other locations are okay? Mr. Speaker, we need goals. We must always aspire to be better, even if perfection never is achieved, because the pursuit of the best should always be our default position. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside South Drive.
Speaker, I am a father of 3 little boys, and as most you know, I'm about to be the father of a little girl any day now. When we found out that my wife was pregnant with our first girl after 3 boys, almost everyone asked the same question. Aren't you excited to have a girl? Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm excited to have another child, yes, but I want our baby girl to be healthy and happy, and that's all we want. Of course, there are differences in our society for boys and girls. For example, a very shocking and heartbreaking statistic is that a girl is almost 5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted by the time she's 18. In her lifetime, there's a 30% chance that she'll be sexually assaulted. And if she is, there's little chance she'll ever get justice. Statistics Canada estimated only about 5% of survivors report their sexual assault to police. That's 1 in 20, Mr. Speaker. This is not the world I want my little girl or my boys to grow up in. And I know that no one in this room wants that either. So what do we do? Because we have to do something. Let's start with listening to survivors and the organizations that advocate for them. They can tell us what they need and what will better protect them. Let's stop re-traumatizing survivors. Again, Stats Canada tells us that 1 in 5 survivors of sexual assault, both women and men, felt blamed. On PEI, one way we reinforce this inaccurate feeling is by interviewing survivors in stark rooms, furnished with only a desk and a couple of chairs, the same rooms we use to interview suspects. If you treat a victim like a perpetrator, don't be surprised when they feel like they're guilty and choose not to come forward. The PEI Sexual Assault Investigation Review Committee has recommended RCMP use soft rooms to interview adult survivors, rooms equipped with a couch, easy chairs, cushions that are used to now interview children. I hope we see these changes immediately. It is such a simple yet impactful thing that we can do for survivors of this trauma. I'm going to close with a quote from Sonny Mariner, the project leader for Improving an Institutional Accountability Project, which reviews police response to sexual violence. Sonny said, quote, "Many survivors stress that the impacts of sexual violence are intense and can destabilize their lives and trust in individuals, but the failures of the justice system go much further. They destabilize their belief in the entire social fabric they previously believed existed fairness to protect them. This can undermine their core beliefs in everything: policing, fundamental fairness, the value of women and girls in society, and the courts," end quote. The only thing I might add to that is, while it's overwhelmingly women and girls who are the victims of sexual assault, any child or victim will feel devalued if justice does not come for their assailant. The system is failing dreadfully at addressing this issue. If we can't listen to the survivors and take action immediately, the issues will never be resolved. Thank you to the organizations that are working tirelessly on this file. My caucus and I pledge to do whatever we can to work with you towards a better, safer island where sexual assault and sexual violence are faced head-on with the full support of the community and where justice is fairly served for each and every survivor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm worried about the housing situation in Summerside. I know the vacancy rate is approaching 3% in Charlottetown, but it is not in Summerside. In fact, we've only had a healthy vacancy rate 1 year in the last decade, and we still have some of the lowest rates in the country. But what do those numbers actually mean? Behind those stats, you have people, and their stories could be anyone's. I have a constituent with 2 children who has rented the same home for $780 heat and lights in, for 9 years. And through no fault of her own, she needs to move this month. The discovery that her wages had clearly not kept pace with the increasing cost of rent was the first shock. There was nothing in her price range. As the days went by, she found herself calling about places that were way outside of her price range because being homeless with 2 school-aged children was scarier than not having enough money to pay for rent and for groceries. But here's the second shock. She couldn't even get a viewing for places that she could never sustainably afford because so many people were applying for the same few spots. By the time she finally did get a place that was nearly twice what she could afford, she was days away from moving into a hotel room with her kids. I cannot describe her stress. I've spoken with another woman who is a social assistance client who said she would be willing to use her whole food allowance, all her living allowances, every dime she had toward rent at this point, if she could only find somewhere for her and her children to live. There isn't anywhere to go. Still, others stay in situations where they are unhappy or unsafe. We simply don't have enough safe and affordable housing in Summerside. Rental vouchers are a decent Band-Aid when you have empty places for a person to move into, but you can't live in a rental voucher. I urge government to use every tool in the toolbox and look at creative solutions because the people behind these statistics are really struggling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as noticed. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question posed on March the 11th. How much tax revenue does the province generate from the construction and sale of housing? HST on new construction for 2020 was $56.7 million. HST on transfer costs related to housing, for example, realtor commissions and legal fees for 2020 was $8.7 million. Real property transfer tax on residential properties, including new and used properties for 2020, was $4.9 million. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yep. And for our first question, I'll call on the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. The Rural Health Initiative public survey was carried out to help guide government on how to, and I quote, improve access to health, social and community services in rural Prince Edward Island. To the Minister of Health and Wellness, when will government release the survey results from the Rural Health Initiative public survey, which concluded last year in December 2020?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. I'll get that information and bring it back as soon as possible, even possibly later this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the answer, Minister. Almost exactly 2 years ago, I attended a packed meeting in Englewood School's gymnasium, back when one could do that, regarding local access to primary care in the South Shore region. Area residents have worked extremely hard to establish a modern medical facility in Crapo, fully furnishing it with medical equipment and exam rooms, and they've even raised $25,000 to Health PEI's benefit to make that happen. And they firmly believe that they deserve ongoing, continued access to primary healthcare services in their region. To the Minister, the throne speech talks of establishing 3 primary care homes or neighbourhoods. Will one of these homes or neighbourhoods be located in Crapo to serve the South Shore region?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and again, thank the honourable member for the question. I, like him, being from a rural part of the province, we rely heavily, without a doubt, on the delivery of healthcare services in those areas. Like the honourable member mentioned as far as fundraising, we have the foundations right across the province that do a tremendous job, are a great partner. With regard to the medical homes and medical neighbourhoods, certainly it's a great initiative that our government is working towards rolling out, and you know, over the next time period, certainly additional information will be forthcoming on that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I was hoping for more, Minister, but I will stay tuned. Last fall, in response to a question that I asked regarding healthcare services in the South Shore area, the Minister of Health and Wellness at that time said this, and again I quote, "We have a primary care resident doctor who is just coming through the system right now and is very interested in being part of that collaborative approach, focused primarily in Cornwall, but sort of like there will be a satellite going out to the South Shore," end quote. A question to the Minister, the new Minister. Is government still committed to a full-time physician physically practicing in Crapo and serving the South Shore region?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, I thank the member for the question. I would have to say that this government is committed to providing health services not only in the South Shore region, but the very best health services that we can right across the province. Mr. Speaker, you look at some of the initiatives that were brought forward in the recent budget with regard to recruitment, with regard to retention. Certainly, can we do more? Are there a lot of challenges right across the province? Absolutely. But again, I certainly do appreciate the honourable member standing up, bringing the concerns forward, and I'll certainly be very happy to work with the member as we move forward in the delivery of healthcare services in his region. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And of course, I want primary healthcare services to be available in local areas across this province too, but there are 9,000 people in the South Shore region without access to a primary healthcare physician in the South Shore area. So these hubs, or homes or neighbourhoods, or whatever you want to call them, will provide collaborative primary care health services by a variety of healthcare professionals at a local level. All of this sounds really wonderful, and I love the idea, and it mirrors what the official opposition has been promoting as a model for rural healthcare delivery for years. A question to the same minister. What is the timeline to establish a physician in Crapo and implement the services of allied healthcare professionals such as chronic disease management nurses at the clinic in Crapo?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and again, thank the member for the question. He's absolutely right. You look right across the board what healthcare providers want to work. The setting that they want to work in is collaborative practice, and certainly when we look at medical homes, that is the whole idea. The premise, if you like, Mr. Speaker, behind the medical homes is to allow physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, mental health and addictions workers to work together. And again, I will reiterate, as I did, Mr. Speaker, in the answer to the honourable member's previous question, that yes, committed to health care provision of the best possible health care services right across the province, and love to work with the honourable member as we move forward in his particular area. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. PEI's unfounded sexual assault cases are the highest in the country at 25% in 2019, more than double the national average. In 2014-2016, some police agencies on PEI reported closer to 50% of cases to be unfounded. Other police agencies on PEI reported as low as 10%. A label of unfounded means that police have determined a crime did not take place, nor was one attempted. Before 2017, some cases had been labeled unfounded if there wasn't enough evidence to charge someone, if the complainant decided they didn't want to proceed, or if a suspect could not be identified. Now those cases should be classified as founded, uncleared. Question to the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. There is a wide discrepancy in numbers between police forces. Do you have confidence that all police forces in PEI are now labeling cases properly and consistently?
The Honorable Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the member across spoke about those numbers, those are troubling numbers, Mr. Speaker. And we really have to do more, Mr. Speaker. We have to, you know, as a legislatures in this House, I'd love to work collaboratively with the opposition, as the member spoke in his statement earlier about working together to find solutions, Mr. Speaker. We have to do more, Mr. Speaker. We have to do more. We have to discuss with the police to make sure they are doing all they can. I do know that in 2018, we put in place where the Crown and police work together to review all files, Mr. Speaker, but we got to continue to do more. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Only about 5% of survivors actually report their sexual assault to police, based on Canadian studies. Think about that for a minute. 95% of sexual assaults are never reported. We see the tip of the iceberg, but much more danger lurks beneath the data. Dania O'Malley of Family Violence Prevention Services says, quote, "Victims have to fight very hard to be believed. I can't imagine how difficult that must be to go through that process and to not find justice at the end of it," end quote. Question for the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. Why does this minister think almost all cases go unreported? And what are you doing to investigate why the number of unfounded cases is still so high on PEI?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, this is a very serious matter that we have to take a deep dive into, Mr. Speaker, because we have to do better. I'm going to discuss with, you know, victim services why these numbers are where they're at, Mr. Speaker. We're going to talk to the dedicated Crown attorney that's dedicated to sexual violence, Mr. Speaker, to find out what we can do more, Mr. Speaker, because we have to do more. We can't not let up on this. We have to work together on this, Mr. Speaker, because any sexual violence it shouldn't happen, Mr. Speaker. Shouldn't happen. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Summerside South Drive.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP set up committees across the country to review sexual assault files that didn't result in a criminal charge. The Sexual Assault Investigation Review Committee was set up in PEI last year and reviews a random sample of files provided by RCMP. The focus of the committee is to find ways to improve the way that investigations are completed and ensure that a trauma-informed approach is taken. Question for the Minister of Fisheries and Communities. When will we see our other police agencies, Charlottetown, Summerside, and Kensington on PEI, start to review files and include the victims from our communities in that process?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we talk to all police chiefs across this island, Mr. Speaker, and we're working collaboratively together, Mr. Speaker. And it has to be about the victim here, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to focus on this. We will have the discussions with the chiefs, so we're all working together for the best cause. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Mr. Speaker, government decided to grandfather in holding ponds regardless of where they are, but each watershed is different. The amount of water that can be taken while still staying in that safe zone for each is different. But this decision doesn't account for that. What could be fine in one watershed may not be in others. Question to the Environment Minister. When and how will you make decisions to limit water withdrawal?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it's good to finally get a question on this because there's a lot of conjecture out there as to what we're actually doing, and it's a great opportunity to clear the air. Again, when we grandfather, it does not mean that holding ponds will not come under the Act. They will. They'll come under the Act in 5 years, and they'll be regulated just like any other piece of water pump equipment is going to be regulated. That said, through our group that currently manages water, they're going to keep an eye on the levels. When we permit, we're going to permit for a certain amount of water, so you're not going to be able to go over the water. And you know, there's probably other initiatives that we're yet to explore that will help us protect them even better. And it's hard to get too far into it till we have the discussion better. But I think at the end of the day, you're probably going to be happy with what government brings forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monitoring those levels means essentially waiting until we see signs of distress in a watershed, and waiting until we see signs of distress is an irresponsible approach. The Dunk is one of the few rivers on PEI that actually still has Atlantic salmon, which the federal government is actively trying to protect. We don't know what the impact of 16 holding ponds could be on that population, but waiting to find out is exactly the opposite approach we should be taking with a species at risk. Question to the Environment Minister. How are you deciding what that safe amount of water is to take from each watershed?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first of all, we don't wait for somebody to ring the alarm bell and then go out and say, oh, there's no water, we better do something about it. We monitor it all the time. So we will monitor it all the time. We're actually monitoring it right now. So we know what the recharge is right now. And what I'm told, particularly in the Dunk River watershed, the recharge is really high and really good this year, which is a really positive thing. That said, as we know, as the weather patterns shift through the spring, we may end up with a dry spring, and that may change drastically. But we monitor it every single day. So this isn't something that we have really professional staff that does this all the time. And what they do is they make decisions based on evidence that they collect all the time. So I guess to answer your question, science. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And no one's suggesting that you wait until the water runs dry. What you actually do is wait until it drops to 70% of stream base flow, and that's when you decide to shut it off. But by that time, you have caused harm. Mr. Speaker, the real research question that needs to be answered is not, will we run out of water as a province, but it's how much can we safely take from an individual watershed before we cause harm. And that is not something we are currently looking into. Question to the Environment Minister. If the holding ponds in one watershed put us at a limit of what can be safely withdrawn, will you issue new water withdrawal permits in that watershed?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
So again, not to sound negative, but what the member's saying is not true. And like I tried to point out, we monitor it all the time. And when we have the Water Act in place and the permitting that goes along with it, as I've already pointed out, will allow us to permit based on availability, which means we won't permit for more than is there and available for whatever use it is, be it agriculture, be it the city of Charlottetown, be it some other organization or a golf course. We will only permit based on what is available to them, based on what's available in the watershed. So I think we have a really good plan. I think this is something that obviously has been worked on really hard by the department. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to be able to protect water because we are going to have these measures in place. I think that's really, really, really good news for Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I've gone through the Minister's briefing book. You absolutely measure stream base flow and watershed recharge for the province, but not on a watershed by watershed basis. And here's the problem. So here's the challenge you've created, Minister. Government is now going to have to pick winners and losers. Farms that invested in holding ponds get water. Others in the area will have to suffer and not access water if we are at limits. The decision either pits farmers against farmers or it means the environment loses. The research project you really need has to answer the question, how much water can we safely take in a single watershed? And then you figure out how many heavy users are in the area, and you can calculate the fair share for each person. Question to the Environment Minister. Will you step back from a blanket approach that at best gives hindsight, not oversight, and leaves many farmers out of the equation entirely? And will you come back with a plan that is actually evidence-based and actually fair?
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's so many things that were said that were wrong or untrue there that I don't think I have enough time to answer them all. Number one, I don't have a briefing book. So you have somebody's briefing book, but it certainly is not my briefing book because this is what I have in front of me today. And a piece of paper. I do not have a briefing book because I work with my department every single day and I'm involved in the decisions that are being made. I'm right there at the table while they're being made. As far as, and once again I'll say, we do look at it watershed by watershed. We do look at the volume of water. We permit based on what's available. And we divide it amongst the people who need it. That's exactly what we do. And each year, if you come back to receive a permit, if the neighbor no longer needs water, that may mean that there's more water available. But there may not be the recharge to allow that. So there's a lot of things shifting around all the time. And I'm so thankful that I have experts making the decisions, not politicians, because if politicians were making it, they'd be making the decision wrong like they've done for centuries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The third option is an invaluable resource for someone who has been sexually assaulted. Unfortunately, this option, promised by government, has seen a couple of implementation dates slide by over the past 2 years. The last time I asked about the third option, the Minister of Justice and Public Safety said, and I quote, "I am excited," and went on to say that the third option would be rolled out in July 2020. Here we are now at the end of March, and it still hasn't happened yet. Question to the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. What is the latest implementation date for the third option, and will this one actually happen?
Minister of Justice and Public Safety, Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do have to own that, Mr. Speaker. We have missed 2 dates so far, Mr. Speaker, and there's a lot of things that are out of my control, Mr. Speaker, but I can assure you that the third option is coming, Mr. Speaker. But it's important that when it comes, it's done right, Mr. Speaker. There's training. The nurses are doing their training right now to protect that delicate material, Mr. Speaker, and we have to remember about the victims here, Mr. Speaker. We don't want to re-traumatize anyone more than once. So I apologize. I do want to get this right, and it will be delivered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that. And we have to remember that survivors are also re-traumatized when these services aren't in place. Sexual violence against both adults and our children is a serious problem in PEI, and it's getting worse. This government has some great ideas, and of course several media releases for programs that would help address this. But will we ever actually see these get off the ground? The 1,000 first days to support new moms and babies? Nope. Midwifery, again, a support especially for vulnerable moms and babies? Nope. Women's health strategy, a plan for women at every age and in every walk of life? Nope. Gender-based analysis, not just a report but outcomes and changes? Nope. Question to the Premier. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 children are sexually assaulted in PEI. These are unacceptable in numbers. Why have these programs not been an immediate priority for your government?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question, and those numbers are extremely troubling. And I know when the member from Summerside South Drive gave his statement by members, Mr. Speaker, that I hope all Islanders were listening and get to listen to that, because it dawned on me that I have a soon-to-be 17-year-old daughter, and that hits home, Mr. Speaker. And I think we have to look beyond the stats of this and realize that these are island children, Mr. Speaker. These are island children. We are working hard, Mr. Speaker, to implement these programs and changes that are long needed, Mr. Speaker. I don't have an excuse, nor am I trying to post one. We are working very, very diligently. It is a high priority for me personally, for our government, Mr. Speaker, and I want to ensure those programs are in place as soon as they possibly can be, Mr. Speaker, and many more as we roll through this. But those numbers are unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, and we need to work together to address them immediately. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Guy Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across Canada, a wide range of serious issues in long-term care facilities, such as understaffing and underpaid workers, sometimes without sick days, have been exposed during the pandemic. In June 2020, sorry about that. That shouldn't be in there. Former Minister of Health stated that the province was doing a full review of long-term care facilities on PEI, and there was a seniors health services review that was referenced in the budget address. Question to the Minister of Health. The findings from a long-term care review would be very helpful to determine priorities for the operational budget. Has this review been completed, and will you table the full report in this House?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for bringing this forward. Certainly, we've heard that, and I, as new minister in this portfolio, certainly have heard the challenges with regard to long-term care, with regard to that, yes, we have seniors that we owe so much to that are in inappropriate settings, whether it's in hospital or in other community care facilities, for example, Mr. Speaker. So we have to move forward, and we You look at the budget, the direction that we're taking with regard to healthcare, right across the board, Mr. Speaker, and certainly seniors and long-term care will be front and center, and is front and center in that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent months, I've had an increasing number of people from my community looking for help for themselves or direction for family members who are experiencing suicidal thoughts or in need of addiction and mental health support. This past Sunday, shortly after midnight, I had a constituent reach out for help. And at that time of the day, the ER at the Prince County Hospital is an option, or I can direct them to the Island Helpline. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Health. In those hours of the day that are often most difficult for many people, what direction can I provide my constituents with?
The honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I go back to some of the initiatives that are in the budget. Can we do more? Absolutely. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. And that is one of the reasons, Mr. Speaker, that we are looking at the single point of access line, which will be announced and operational very shortly. That we continue to work with our partners with mobile response units, Mr. Speaker. And you look at the number of programs, there are a tremendous number of programs out there, but I think one of the main things is, again, that single point of access, to be able to provide the information to constituents that the honourable member, and I applaud, him taking that call, getting that information, I'm sure, for his constituent at that time. But we have to have that information more readily available, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road.
So, Mr. Speaker, I decided to find out how it works because I needed to give this constituent who needed help now an answer. So I phoned the Island Helpline during business hours, and I was on hold for 17 minutes listening to elevator music. But finally, a nice person answered the call, and I was told that those waits can be as long as an hour listening to elevator music. And Mr. Speaker, that's because very few people work there. My question to the same minister, do you believe this is adequate response time for someone experiencing suicidal thoughts at this present time, not waiting for a plan down the road, listening to elevator music?
The honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the honourable member, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that, again, is why we have to do better. And again, I'll go back to the single point of access number, the mobile response units, that we have to be there for Islanders. Certainly it has been front and center. You look at again, Mr. Speaker, the initiatives in the budget. But again, I do agree with the honourable member completely that anybody that is going to be on the line looking for assistance with regard to a mental health situation or crisis, that is not acceptable, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And no, you're right, it is not acceptable. Now I want to get back to my constituent. I find the long wait hour to be unacceptable for people in distress. So, Minister, will you please commit to examine these matters and make improvements immediately?
The honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I'd mentioned, like with regard to the single point of access number, that will be up and available, going very shortly. With regard to the mobile response units, rather, Mr. Speaker, yes, I would love to be able to say that they're going to be on the road tomorrow, but I'll be honest. That is not going to be the case. We are actively working with our partners to have them available, to Islanders and serving Islanders as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are people in our province waiting an hour for help who may be suicidal or in need of addiction help. By contrast, in our office this morning, we called the VLT hotline operated by Atlantic Lotto. And within 3 seconds, a live person answered the hotline, Mr. Speaker, and advised us that the nearest VLT was at Dooley's, just 2 streets up. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Are you aware of the VLT hotline, and do you think that this is a good use of public funds?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Member, the VLT hotline is run through Atlantic Lottery Corporation. As the Minister, I will have that conversation with them, but I also agree with the Minister of Health. It's very important that we do make the response times for any mental health issues shorter, and I will work with my colleague to ensure that. And I would also like to point out that the proceeds from the winnings at Atlantic Lottery, percentage has gone to help with mental health and addictions, and also we will increase that as we move forward to make sure that Islanders are looked after in the way that they should be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, there's quite a difference. Up to an hour wait for a potential suicidal Islander, and 3 seconds for someone searching for a VLT location. And Minister, of course you run the affairs. It's an interprovincial corporation and your deputy sits on that board. So why are people looking for VLTs served faster than people with suicidal thoughts?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Member, I can't really comment on within the Department of Health how things are operating, but I will say that I will make the commitment to work with the Minister of Health to ensure that Islanders who are suffering from mental health and addictions are given the services that they require. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Minister, yes, you did say you were going to speak to the Minister of Health. You did talk about some of the funding going back into mental health and addictions here on Prince Edward Island. And I do believe that with Atlantic Lottery Corporation that can be better used to the profits in supporting Islanders and services here on Prince Edward Island, like suicide prevention. So will you commit to having a conversation with Atlantic Lottery Corporation to advocate for more funding for that rather than directing people to the nearest VLT?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Member, I would be happy to have that conversation. I would like to point out, though, that all of the winnings through Atlantic Lottery Corporation do go back to the provinces, and they are used for the services that Islanders and all Atlantic residents expect, and will continue to scrutinise how that money is used. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Mr. Speaker, my questions to the Premier today. Recently, this House adopted a motion containing multiple requests for government action regarding the expansion of online gaming. Many good points were raised by members of this House regarding the concerns and potential repercussions of an online gaming expansion. It has been almost 2 weeks since this motion passed, allowing the Premier and his government an opportunity to consider a response. A question to the Premier: when can Islanders expect your government to release an updated response to gaming strategy?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would have to defer that question to the Minister of Finance in terms of the overall gaming strategy. I would say to the Leader of the Third Party that, you know, in an ideal and perfect world, this wouldn't be space that we would want to be in. These are, I think we refer to them as the sin taxes, and these are tricky ones for all governments and for all people, because you are essentially providing a service that could lead to difficulties for the people involved. And I think what all governments have realized is that if government doesn't have some type of regulation in place, we're still left to deal with all of the challenges that are going to take place with these types, whether they're gaming, whether they're drinking, whether they're drugs. And I think we're just but look, to be very honest, it's an uncomfortable space for every government to be in, for sure. And I know, having been in government, that you can certainly relate to that. But in terms of an overall gaming strategy and upgrades, I will need to defer with the Minister and report back. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my next question is to the Premier as well. The Standing Committee on Health and Social Development met with the gaming addiction expert, and he had concerns with this planned expansion. Specifically, he was concerned that PEI's lack of spending on gambling addiction supports, which he recommended should be 30 to 50% of gaming profits. And it's glad to hear that the Minister of Finance is considering putting this amount up. but the last figures indicate PEI received $18 million in gambling profits, but only $300,000 was spent on support programs. Question to the Premier: when can Islanders expect your government to increase the gaming supports to levels recommended by the addiction experts?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that will continue to increase as we move forward. I think we're really focused on trying to improve the delivery of mental health and addiction services in this province. I think they go hand in hand. When someone is having challenges with addiction, it affects their mental health and so forth, not just them, but their family and their friends, et cetera, Mr. Speaker. So I think you'll see that number increase. I think we've showed a willingness over here to be open to making sure we're doing what needs to be done, and if that means diverting more of the potential revenue that's coming forward from the online gaming, Mr. Speaker, I think we're very much open to doing that, and I think we can sort of be in a position to talk about that in the days ahead for sure.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one common thing I've heard from Islanders is that they can't understand why this government is in such a rush to implement this plan. Concerns have been raised by numerous people, yet the government continues to maintain there's no need to consult with Islanders. The Minister of Finance even stated previously they didn't have any responsibility to consult with Islanders, and therefore won't be doing so. A question to the Premier: will you respect the motion that has passed and immediately halt this expansion until a province-wide consultation process can occur?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I guess where I continue to come down on this issue really is that I really do feel if we were inventing online gaming, that it would require very broad consultation, Mr. Speaker. What we're trying to do is to respond to a request to the regulating body of lotteries in the Atlantic region, Mr. Speaker, who are saying hundreds of millions of dollars go offshore, which indicates to us that individuals within Atlantic Canada are already in this space. And if we could find a way to do so in a more regulated environment where we can monitor a little bit more closely who is playing, how they're playing, how much they're playing, Mr. Speaker, and to divert some of that money from offshore into the programs and services, as the Leader of the Third Party quite rightly indicates that we need to spend money on. So that's exactly where we're at. So I really feel that we're not inventing something. We're really just late to the game trying to respond in a regulated model for those Islanders who I hope none of them do this, Mr. Speaker. If they choose to do it, I hope they would do it through this regulated format for the reasons I just mentioned. But as I said from the very beginning, it's an uncomfortable space for all governments to be in, Mr. Speaker, and ours included.
The Honourable Member from Morell-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the student well-being teams had come in over a 3-year process, I think, starting in 2017, and credit to the former government for creating that initiative, and certainly to this government for continuing it on. The members of the representatives of those teams come in to present to Standing Committee recently, and I want to, they were asked about, what resources they would need, having done this for a little while, and I want to read you a quote from one of the members that came to that committee. And this is after asking about, what they needed. We've been saying since the very beginning, and schools have been very loud about this, and we've noticed it in our own referrals and families that we're working with. We need somebody who's dedicated to supporting parents. That's a huge, huge piece of our work, and we can't always get to it as much as we like, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a question to the Minister of Education. What strategies are being looked at to further engage parents to build on the supports that Island students are getting through our student wellbeing teams?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. Most certainly, the mental, social, and physical health of our students is of utmost importance, and certainly throughout the times of COVID, we've seen we need to support our children and youth more than ever before in the school system and the education system, and our government has really come together to wrap our arms around our student. Actually, I wasn't able to attend that committee meeting, but I had recently listened to it, and that is one thing thing that stuck out to me in terms of some of the comments made. What are we doing to support our parents? I think we can always do more in terms of the parental support groups that are available. So we have our active parenting of teens, our triple TP parenting, our positive parenting from 2 homes, and our ICANN program. Again, Mr. Speaker, this is an area I'd love to see focus on, and it was heard loud and clear through that committee. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Morel-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yeah, at that committee meeting, they had said that they had team members working with the Positive Parenting for 2 Homes program to have team members trained in that. They also had talked about the Triple P Fearless program as well. Mr. Speaker, I remember specifically a number of conversations at the doors in both elections that I campaigned on, and certainly in between, from teachers and EAs who really felt that, like, that connection to home, like they could do everything they could do with that student, but if I could just get into that home, or calls from parents saying, wishing they could. So I guess a follow-up question to the minister, but if the teams are saying they don't have the resources to get into the homes like they can, should we not be providing those resources to the student wellbeing teams?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And through COVID, the amount of investment that has gone into our educational system, I spoke of it recently in the House, it's incredible. We've stepped up like never before. And if we look at our budget in terms of our investments in the K-12 education system, so we're going to have an 80 additional frontline positions, so that includes 20 teachers, 34 educational assistants, 12 school counselors, 4 autism consultants, 8 bus drivers, and 6 school secretaries to support the needs of the school population. I fully agree with the honourable member. We need to do more to support our parents, and I am committed to this House that I will take this on personally. I will look into it, and we will make progress on this file. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morel-Donagh, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister. They're working with students on the things that we all try as parents too. Sleep hygiene, screen time, the planning and organization of days, and all these things help with certain mental health aspects. Of course, there's even bigger issues with trauma and abuse that are going on. But it all, again, go back to it does sound like these teams need the extra resources. All those other things are great. But, Minister, what do we do then specifically with the teams to make sure that, and I don't think it should be done annually, I think it should be done more regularly, to make sure that we're following up them to say, look, this is the trend, this is the need, let's get to it before it becomes too big of an issue. How often are we getting feedback from these teams on the resources that they do need so that it doesn't have to come to a standing committee, say?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for a great question. I think in listening to that committee meeting, I think it's come to light that we need to do a review of the student wellbeing teams. They have been fundamental ensuring the health and well-being of our students. But that being said, like anything, there's areas for improvement. One of the challenges I believe associated with the well-being teams is that these individuals who work within them, they work across departments. So you've got the Department of Education, Justice, Health and Social Development, and sometimes we need to just make sure that we reduce those silos. And Mr. Speaker, I am fully committed to doing a review and seeing where we can better support the teams and our students. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today the government announced they will cover the costs of testing island racehorses for strangles at an estimated cost of approximately $80,000. The commitment and speed of this program to assist the harness racing industry has left many islanders wondering why other programs and services can't be turned around so quickly. It would be great if the health and safety of people was also a top priority. So a question to the Minister of Finance. What programs for islanders in need are getting bumped so we can fund testing horses?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's, I guess, a little concerning to me that the honourable member does not think that this is an important issue. The money will come through the Harness Racing Association in tandem with government, and there is a program through agriculture that we are working on right now to access some of the funds that are needed. It's very, very important to the industry and a number of rural islanders that we get this under control and we have a racing season come this spring. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid Stratford, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would say there's a lot of things that are very important to islanders. Question to the Premier. Given the Minister of Finance is in a clear conflict of interest, did she recuse herself from the Executive Council table for this decision?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't remember this issue coming to Cabinet for approval. I think there's a budgetary line that would be provided for, Mr. Speaker, but I would say in response to the question from the Honourable Member that over the past year, I think you've seen government respond with programs as immediate and fast as any government probably in the history of this program, of this province, Mr. Speaker. That includes social assistance, that includes housing, that includes sick leave pay for those who need it, Mr. Speaker. So the harness industry is important to this province, Mr. Speaker, and it's important for government to step up and help those sectors, Mr. Speaker. I think what we've done for harness racing, we've done for every pillar of our economy, and we've done through all members of our society, Mr. Speaker, during this last year, Mr. Speaker, and I think we've done it at a faster rate than anybody in the history of this province, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, end of question period. Minister statements. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to provide an update on the work that is being done to ensure our public service is more inclusive, embraces diversity, and is reflective of the people that we serve, and especially on the observance of the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which occurred last Sunday. We want to do as much as we can to cultivate an inclusive, safe workplace culture where unique talents, skills, and perspectives are valued and leveraged, and continue to build welcoming workspaces, places where employees are engaged, respected, and valued. It is through these diverse perspectives that we will enhance the quality of the services we deliver to the public. The Public Service Commission carries out its daily work and mandate while applying its diversity and inclusion policy. This policy strengthens our commitment to meeting the needs of our emerging population demographics and our diverse island communities. This policy also broadens our scope and focuses on inclusion with many stakeholders through the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council, which includes people from all government departments. This committee provides advice, recommendations, and guidance to government on diversity and inclusion topics and oversees the development of a diversity and inclusion strategy. This strategy, which is nearly completed, will build upon and expand our progress with diversity and inclusion that our policy had started. The Public Service Commission is currently developing an unconscious bias webinar for all civil service employees, and that will become part of the orientation for all new employees coming into government. We are also expanding our diversity and inclusion training to include more topics, such as anti-racism. We all share responsibility to ensure diversity and inclusion throughout our public service, and we will continue to inform, educate, and support all employees in achieving this throughout government. Mr. Speaker, we all play a part in creating a welcoming, open, and safe culture. We have built and delivered several corporate diversity and inclusion training programs for the public sector, and 4 new courses have been added to our learning and development calendar. These new courses support continuous learning in our public service and focus on applying an inclusion lens in decision-making, inclusive communication, leading respectful workplaces, and unconscious bias. Over 200 employees have participated in these valuable education courses since they were introduced in April of 2020. We also partner with community organizations to provide expanded training, such as the Pronoun workshop delivered by Pride PEI and a culture inclusion session recently delivered by the PEI Association for Newcomers to Canada. Expanding learning through these partnerships will continue to provide our public service competence and ensure that we communicate effectively with all islanders. Mr. Speaker, there is still work to be done, and we know COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on many groups and demographics, and the disparity has been exposed for some. As Minister responsible for the Public Service Commission, I will ensure that we continue to offer training opportunities, highlight our champions within our organizations, and further our work in this space. Through our actions, our partnerships, and commitment to doing better, we will foster inclusion and celebrate diversity both within the public service and across our province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Mermaid, Stratford, and the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise. Thank you to the Minister for bringing this forward. I've spoken a number of times in this House about the diversity within our public service, and I've spoken to it from a perspective of young people, and because when you actually bring young people into the fold, they bring new innovative ideas. But really what we need to look at is we need to ensure that people are actually seeing themselves represented in the public service. If you're not seeing yourself represented, then your voice isn't truly being heard. Representation ensures that people are more comfortable accessing government services and that they receive a higher standard of service. We need to consider whether people of certain underrepresented backgrounds face lower promotion rates. We've seen this often, and we can see this on a regular basis. There's not a lot of diversity when you get up to the higher levels of government, you know, senior manager, deputy ministers, etc. You don't see a lot of promoting upwards and creating more diversity. That's important. We have to look at what do those promotion rates look like, because if we're not promoting people with lived experience, then we're not hearing their voices and it's not getting into policy. The higher rate of applicants from underrepresented communities, what do those numbers look like? Are you tracking those numbers, and are we seeing an increase in those numbers? Because if we're not tangibly tracking metrics to see if we're doing better, you can't say you're doing better. So it's important that those kinds of measurements are included. Implementing name-blind hiring, we've talked about that in this legislature before, and that is a method where the name of the person is not put forward with their application, so that you can actually ensure that the person is being hired based on their skill set rather than potentially what their name is. And you can look at that from any perspective, but it's important that we are hiring for skill sets, not a perceived or an unconscious bias. What are we doing to expand our civil service when it comes to French? Are we providing all services in bilingual services for all departments? Layer on to that, when you look at the immigration for the province, how many people can take their driver's license and do it in Spanish? I have a constituent who can't, so therefore she can't take her driver's test because she can't understand Spanish. So that's limiting what she's actually able to do and her independence, because she can't speak Spanish clearly enough or understand it clearly enough to be able to take that test. There are so many levels that we need to be looking at when we look at how we're diversifying our public service. We need to look at making it easier for external candidates to get into the public service. So from the Federal Public Service Commission's 2019-2020 annual report, they stated that one way to increase access to diverse pools of candidates is to open jobs to people from outside the public service. So if you already have a very limited diversification within your public sector workforce, only opening it internally is not increasing it. So opening it up for the general population to be able to apply for it. I would have to ask the minister on this committee that has been created, is there BIPOC representation from a policy analyst perspective? You can train people all you want, but if the voices of those with lived experience aren't at the table and making the decisions, you are not doing it right. So we need to make sure that it's not tokens. We need to make sure that it is actually clear and very, very considered consultation in this, and that all people are represented within the committee. So I appreciate it being brought forward, and I certainly hope that we have the right voices at the table. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cornwall, Banks, third-party House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An inclusive public service is extremely important, Mr. Speaker. We've seen over the past few years of our immigration numbers increasing. We're all thankful that they actually did, Mr. Speaker, because we know that they're a lifeline to growing the population of Prince Edward Island. But our infrastructure around those individuals that are coming here, Mr. Speaker, has to also grow. And I think that we can't allow it to allow those numbers to get ahead of our infrastructure around hiring and the civil service and so on and so forth, and every other business. And I mean, racism is alive and well in Prince Edward Island. Let's kid ourselves not. It's unfortunate, but it's there. and we have to pay attention to it. And we as legislators have to continue to progress and speak out. And we speak out about mental health, we speak out about all kinds of things. And this is one area that we must continue to enforce our opinions on it and bring it forward and challenge people. You hear it all the time, and it's unfortunate. The people who manage our civil service are, for the most part, hardworking individuals who understand that they must hold and maintain the trust of Islanders in everything they do. Mr. Speaker, it's also important, I've had an opportunity to work with people with persons with disabilities. And that is one sector and one area that I think strongly we should be also including to ensure that those individuals are also included in some of these statements that were made by the minister. And we can always do more in the face of those individuals and support them and hire them and put them into spaces where they can thrive and grow, Mr. Speaker, because I think there is a certain lack thereof. But we can always do more as a province to ensure that everyone, no matter their differences, is made to feel included and safe, Mr. Speaker. And whether that be in public service, private business, or in their home or in their communities, we need to do more. And as legislator, it's our responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're all aware of the negative impacts that COVID-19 has had on our island, businesses, and industries over the past year. The hospitality sector has experienced significant hardship, which in turn has affected our famous mussel industry in PEI. Annually, the mussel industry on PEI employs around 1,500 people and has an economic value of over $60 million. My department has been working closely with the mussel industry throughout the pandemic to help identify areas of need. Mr. Speaker, based on the work and discussions with the industry, we've developed the PEI Mussel Retail Promotional Support Initiative. This initiative has provided cost-shared funding to island mussel processors so that they can enhance demand to existing markets and access this funding to increase their sales during the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, this program was cost-shared in collaboration with stakeholders of the PEI mussel industry, the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture, and is being delivered to processors through the Food Island Partnership. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of this initiative as it allows our processors to aggressively showcase their product to markets without having to participate in incentive price reductions, which in turn reduce the value of the product that we have. Mr. Speaker, this program is a great example of how we collaborate with industry to help mitigate the damage caused by COVID-19, and we will certainly continue to do this because we recognize that these important industries will be paramount in leading us out of this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, programs like these would not be possible without the strong connection that our department and our government has with the PEI mussel industry. And we will continue to support our essential industries by assisting where we can through solid partnerships. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my provincial colleagues for their participation in this program and, of course, industry for stepping up and addressing an area of need to help further economic recovery in our province. As we move forward to warmer days, I encourage everyone to continue to support local and seasonal shops and, of course, enjoy our world-famous PEI mussels. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke, in the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is certainly an interesting announcement. I think we're all well aware that the impacts of COVID-19 have been quite serious for a wide range of industries, and the mussel industry on PEI is certainly no exception to that. We do have a great opportunity here to support the mussel industry in being innovative and creative, and it is good to see government working with them, and I hope that this initiative will be led by the industry, and there will be space for their innovation and creativity to shine through. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Island mussel growers are known for producing the best product in the world. Fishers all across the island are industry leaders who work every day to make the PEI mussel industry as sustainable and productive as possible. These men and women deserve our support, and I'm glad to see that government and stakeholders will be working to ensure that this product and our world-class producers are receiving the support they deserve through these uncertain times. Mr. Speaker, let's get behind all of our seafood producers and ensure we, as consumers, are doing our part to help maintain this industry and enjoy some great island seafood at this time. Thank you.
End of minister statements. Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, by command of Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, I beg leave to table the 2019-2020 Summerside Regional Development Corporation Annual Report in French and English for the period ending March 31st, 2019 and March 31st, 2020, and I move, second by the Minister of Finance, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, by command of Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, I beg leave to table the 2018-2019 Grain Elevators Corporation Annual Reports for the period ending July 31st, 2018 and July 31st, 2019, and I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By command of Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, I beg leave to table the budgetary handouts for the operating budget for 2021-22, and I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, that this document be now received and lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the PEI water extraction policy, which demonstrates the department in fact calculates recharge on the provincial level on averages for the year, not at a watershed-by-watershed basis, and I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that the same be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a letter from the Child and Youth Advisory Committee of the PEI Office of the Child and Youth Advocate, a letter to the three-party leaders with their recommendations, which I'll go through quickly: accessibility to mental health services, foster to adopt program, affordable and accessible housing, lowering the voting age to 16, Indigenous matters, environmental issues, and tuition waivers for former youth in care. This also includes a report from UNICEF Canada, which includes recommendations for Canada from the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child in youth-friendly language. And I move, seconded by Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table another document from the Child and Youth Advisory Committee of the PEI Office of the Child and Youth Advocate. This one is a bit about what they have been working on themselves. It's quite an impressive gathering of letters they've sent advocating on Indigenous issues, services, COVID-19. There's a whole bunch in here. So I move, seconded by the member from Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park. Oh. Any more table of documents? No? Reports by committee. The Honourable Member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Deputy Speaker and on behalf of the Standing Committee on Legislative Assembly Management and yourself as Chair, I beg leave to introduce a report of the committee regarding Bill 100 and 102. And I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from Morell-Donagh, that the same be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110.5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I will be moving the motion for adoption of the report tomorrow, Wednesday, March 24th, 2021.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
Any more reports by committees? Introduction of government bills. Government motions. Order of the day, government. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Honorable Premier that the first order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 1, consideration of the estimates in committee.
The Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Honorable Premier that the said bill be read a second time.
Shall it carry? The Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move seconded by the Honorable Premier that, which one is that? That this House do now resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration grant of supply to Her Majesty.
Shall it carry? The Honorable Member from Tignish Palmer Row, Deputy Speaker, the Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, please.
The House is now in a committee of the whole House to consider the grant of supply to Her Majesty. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and title for Hansard?
Mary Kinsman, Director of Finance and Corporate Services for the Department of Agriculture and Land.
Thank you very much and welcome. Honorable members, we are beginning with the Department of Agriculture and Land on page 24. Department Management, Corporate Services. Minister, did you have anything you wanted to start with prior to this, or did you just want me to go right into it?
Let's do a deep dive.
Okay. Corporate services. Appropriations provided for operation of the office of the minister and deputy minister and centralized administrative functions for the department. Administration, $35,600. Equipment, $3,000. Material supplies and services, $38,700. Professional services, $15,600. Salaries, $493,800. Travel and training, $61,000. Total corporate services, $647,700. Shall I carry?
Carry.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Just an overall question for the whole department. Is there a strategic plan in place for the department that would support all of the spending of the department?
A strategic plan for all the department? Well, we're continuously looking at as things change on our spending, and we do an annual summary of what we're doing.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. So a strategic plan for the department, though, wouldn't just be a 1 year or what's happening on the fly. It would be 1 year, 3 year, 10 year. Is there a plan for that?
Yes. At the present time, there's one being created for 2021 to 2025. It's not complete, but should be complete in the near future.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you for that. And so if it's not complete, is the expenses laid out in this budget identified in that strategic plan to support these spending allocations?
Well, part of a strategic plan, of course, is our budgeting. But all our programs, like we have performance monitoring on all our programs, and they are reported on. You'll see on our website as the policy people have reviewed programs, they will be there. So we do review everything that we have in place.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
I'm okay for this section. Oh, no, sorry.
Sure, Mermaid Stratford.
Do you have a date or estimated date that strategic plan will be completed, and is that something that will be tabled in the House?
Don't know if we have a date, but it will be tabled as soon as it's done.
Mermaid Stratford.
But what timeline are you working towards? Usually if you're working on a project, you have an estimated time for delivery on it. So do you have an estimated?
I don't have an exact date, but I would say in the next 2 months we'll have a completed plan.
Okay. Thank
Mermaid
you.
Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting me keep going.
Summerside South Drive.
Just a general question, because I'm not exactly sure where to ask it, but we've talked a lot about electric rates and whatnot in the past, or at least I have, and I'm wondering if there's anything within this budget anywhere that addresses the issue of having farmers within the residential rate class and allowing them to transition out, as mentioned by the Minister of Energy during recent debates. Is there anything within any section within
There's nothing in this that would be in the Minister of Energy's budget.
Summerside South Drive.
So that would be, there's nothing within this at all? Is that what I heard? Sorry.
That's right.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Shall the section carry? Carry. Total department management, $647,700. Shall it carry? Carry. Farm business risk management. Appropriations provided for the administration of the department's farm income support programs. Administration, $60,500. Equipment, $39,300. Materials, supplies, and services, $42,700. Professional services, $151,000. Salaries, $2,321,200. Travel and training, $230,900. Grants, $15,781,600. Total farm business risk management, $18,627,200. O'Leary and Verness.
Minister, just as a question there, I see you overspent a bit on your equipment budget. What specifically did you buy as far as equipment on farm risk management? I'm just kind of wondering what the equipment would be. I'm thinking maybe a drone, but...
So that's, I'm going to move to the side here because I'm talking into glass here. That would be the computer software equipment that we're doing an upgrade on the on all the programming at AIC. We're modernizing it, and of course, they're doing a great job. We're making it paperless. We're making it less contact, and so we're just in the beginning of this, and I'm looking forward to the outcome on this in the future. Of course, this was the department got hit with the malware attack, cyber attack. So they've dealt with that, they dealt with COVID, and they still delivered on a paperless system in time for crop insurance. So they're doing a great job there.
O'Leary Inverness.
Is this also in this section when it comes to farm risk management practices? I mean, obviously, we've talked a little bit about a price assurance scheme for livestock. I'm assuming that falls under this section, but where yet, I'm thinking it might be under professional services, but to put together that potential scheme?
Yep. I don't know if I like the term scheme, but
well, I don't mean it
the program. Yeah, we are definitely looking at that. We're in early stages with discussions with the three maritime provinces. New Brunswick and Nova Scotia are interested in going in with us. So we're working with the Maritime Beef Council to come up with a recommendation from them. And so hopefully sooner than later we can introduce that program.
O'Leary Inverness.
I certainly can appreciate the benefits and advantages of having it as a maritime program as such, but in light of that the other provinces may not move forward or may reduce the potential that this program could have. I mean, PEI is in a little bit more of a unique situation because of our issues around soil health, and we think that livestock manures can be an advantage to that, but is there a possibility if the other provinces don't go along that Prince Edward Island would go alone on this? I mean, other provinces do operate price assurance programs.
Yeah, no, we will move ahead on it. Hopefully, if we'd like to go with them, but if not, we're going to look at going ourselves as well.
O'Leary Inverness.
So is there anything then in the budget, though, that's going to reflect that? I'll just go with some scenarios. So say you're giving till July to the other provinces to come on board with this, and if they don't, will you be able to do something maybe in September to do something along this line? And do you have it in the budget that reflects that, I guess, should you have to do that?
Mary, you want to?
There's nothing in this budget yet for price insurance.
O'Leary
So
Inverness.
it's still being developed,
Okay.
yes.
So then we can assume then from that answer is that there will be no price assurance for livestock for this coming fiscal year.
That's right.
Okay, well, anyway, I guess that's what I just wanted to get a bit of a sense on that. My other question, Chair, will be when it comes to your professional services, like I say, you had 151,000, you only spent 36,000, so you have some money left over there. What was it that you didn't spend money on professional services then?
This funding was for the modernization. We had put aside $140,000 for the modernization of this unit. So some of it was spent in other places, like as you see over in equipment, so it got moved to where we spent it. There were a number of things that they did complete this year, but because of COVID and whatever, we had to take a different turn on some of the things. But they've got a lot of their documents and applications that are now electronic. They've purchased their equipment for staff, so we can go paperless. Clients, we've set them up now that they can pay through their banks. We've improved the processes for crop insurance coverage and developing new programs. So that's a start, and I think they have further goals over the next year. So we left the budget the same. That's a cost share budget. That $140,000 is shared 60% federal, 40% provincial.
Yeah.
O'Leary Inverness.
So ultimately, really, we're just kind of switching some of the equipment and professional services. Sometimes you had to buy a bit more equipment, and that boosted that one and reduced the professional services side. Okay, now I guess I'm certainly not advocating for any reduction in agricultural spending by any means, so I'm okay with on this section, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. So we've heard a lot of talk about the Business Risk Management Program. We've heard from the Canadian Federation of Agriculture that it's it's not working in its current state for farmers, and we've heard that from farmers across the province that it's not as effective as it was intended to be. So what is currently happening within this program to revisit it, redefine it so that it's more beneficial for farmers?
So if you remember last spring, almost a year ago, when the COVID some of the COVID spending. One of the initiatives that the Department of Agriculture did was we increased our ag stability payments to 85% and removed the trigger. That is what is being recommended by the Canadian Federation of Agriculture to do now. So we're already where Canadian Federation of Agriculture is recommending we go to support Canadian farmers. So Prince Edward Island farmers are getting that now. We're in negotiations with the federal minister and the provincial ministers and territorial ministers about the new agri-stability, and it hasn't been decided what direction that's going yet, but we're leading the country in agri-stability funding.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Minister. I'm glad to hear that. That's welcome news. So in this piece, in the business risk management section, would also be the ag recovery. And the application that went in for the Dorian losses was rejected by the federal government. Can you talk to us around that? So I understand $1 million was put in from the provincial perspective. Compared to, how does that make farmers whole, and how do we work towards a better system so that, I mean, we saw Dorian, climate change is happening, we're going to see more and more severe storms like that, but how do we get to a place where farmers aren't losing on harvests? 3 out of 4 years, this was what this one was in 2019,
Yeah,
right?
no, it was disappointing that proposal got turned down by the federal government, and when speaking with the federal minister several times, trying to change her mind, basically we were unsuccessful. What their formula that they used, they basically threw out, it was a $12 million ask from the Federation for the farmers, and immediately they threw out $9 million of that because they said that is covered under our insurance programs already. So they had $3 million of extraordinary costs that they thought, we thought should have been taken up, but they didn't. When they put it into their formula, it didn't trigger a loss for the farmers, which of course our department didn't agree with. So that's why we came up with the $1 million. We already had paid out $3 million in crop insurance through the Dorian crop insurance, that triggered crop insurance during Dorian. So our support is almost $4 million with that. So that $1 million kind of topped off the extraordinary costs that they had. It didn't make them whole, but those payments are going out very shortly, so it'll help with definitely help with particularly the young farmers that took a financial hit.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. And crop insurance is coming up, right? It's not in this section. Am I correct in that, or is it in this section?
It's in this section.
Perfect. So my understanding from the way the crop insurance is set up right now, when you look at, cereals and oilseed growers, the trigger that you have to hit of losses is extremely high, and it makes it even to that point, especially when you're talking corn, for instance, to even purchase crop insurance. So if the program isn't there, that is working for all farmers, what steps are being taken to review that crop insurance program to ensure that, I think with corn, is it 80% losses before it's triggered, or I believe that's where it is with carrots, so that you have to lose 80% of your crop before before your crop insurance even triggers. And that's not always the case, right? So that's a lot of losses. So what's happening with the program to reevaluate whether it's working or not?
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you that crop insurance isn't working on all commodities like you and I think it should. So we are reviewing, for example, high bush blueberries. they're a new crop to Prince Edward Island, so we had to look at different ways of getting enough data that we could get a unit price to insure that crop. So the department worked really hard to get that information, and so now I bush blueberries, but now we got to look at every crop. I think a lot of the crops are working well, but you use carrots as an example. I think we can do better on that, and we have to find the data, and we're continuously looking at that. Lisa, the director of this, she's got dedicated staff that are trying to make it, if it's not working, it's not working. We have to do better.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. And I look at the whole business risk management portfolio as being, a component of climate change mitigation and adaptation, right? Is there steps being taken to work with the Minister for Environment, in which, there is tons of federal dollars being put out there for climate change, right? And agriculture is a huge component of how we can adapt. So is there conversations happening right now in how business risk management programs can be adapted in order to work towards achieving like our greenhouse gas emissions and offsetting some of the costs that we see here?
Absolutely. When it comes to climate change, well, we have a climate change specialist in the department that has taken a lens on, in all our management groups across the department, and AIC is one of them, crop insurance. And we look at crop insurance as climate change is happening. Those crops will they'll almost eliminate themselves, because I don't know if you want to adjust crop insurance to make a crop that's consistently failed pay better. We almost want the premiums to be too high that they can't afford it, so they'll move to a crop that is better suited for the new climate. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So we don't want to, crop insurance can't be a crutch to keep a crop that's failing alive.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. And I would agree with you. However, some of the crops that crop insurance isn't working for, like we saw it with corn, we see it with corn, we need that in order to lift up our livestock strategy.
Oh,
Because we need to
absolutely.
be able to feed
And I
the
don't think corn
livestock.
is a crop that we're talking about. Corn will continue to, as we get new varieties, it will adapt to climate change.
Mermaid Stratford?
We'll get stronger stalks that'll withstand more wind, or heat, need less water, need more heat units. That's where corn will help our.
Thank you, Chair. You're leading me into a whole other area that I'm kind of excited going, and that is research. And what we're seeing, what I'm hearing from farmers, and what I'm hearing from some of the feed supplies stores, like after Dorian, it shone a light on just how many varieties of, and well, let's talk corn, because that's what we saw. You could drive by one field and you'd see every corn stalk standing, and then you could drive by another one. I remember going down in Belfast or Wood Islands and seeing one field where they went one pass with one variety and they kept coming, and you could see that, but then they had run out and they had to finish it with another variety, and that one was all fallen. And it was just such a stark difference between the types of varieties. So one thing that I'm hearing from farmers is where did the research side of the Department of Agriculture go? Because what we're seeing is farmers are doing so much research now, and they're leading the charge without a whole lot of support. And part of the concern around that is who is selling the seed? It's seed sellers, right? And they're getting commissioned on it, so they're going to kind of push what their company.
Yeah, but they're not going to sell a variety that fails on Prince Edward Island. I'm a farmer myself. I buy corn seed, or I did before I took this job, and trust me, they want repeat business. So they want varieties that will withstand hurricanes, and it's a whole different thinking now since Hurricane Dorian on corn crops because we were planting low lignant corn before, which that was the corn that fell down. Not all corn fell down during Dorian.
Oh, I know.
So that is hardly growing now since Dorian. So we're looking at different options, and there is support. Like we do, the federal government with the Harrington Farms. That's a great support system, and maybe we don't utilize it enough. That Harrington Farms with the federal Agriculture Canada is doing great work there, and with great research, and yeah, I think we have to do more with them, and maybe get what might be missing is reporting to the farmers their data.
Mermaid Stratford?
And I'm sure you have others on the list, so I'll just follow that up with, I couldn't agree more. The information that comes out of any of the research that we do should be pushed out to ensure that the farmers have it. But if we can work in conjunction with Harrington, for instance.
Oh, absolutely.
I know I've had experience back before I took on this job with hops, right? And they were doing so much testing with hops.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be beneficial to grow here in PEI, because you don't want to grow something that fails.
And we have the long-term crop study with Dr. Sutsi Lee. That's I got an early presentation from her on her progress so far. She's doing some great work, and she's a very brilliant person. I'm looking forward to that long-term crop study coming out in the near future.
Right. And I think that's under sustainable agriculture, right? So we'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you, Chair. I'll
Welcome.
let somebody else go.
Leader of the Opposition. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister. I really enjoyed this conversation, learned a lot, and I've spoken to a number of farmers in District 17 who have struggled over the last couple of years for mostly climate-related issues, and you just had the discussion about corn there, and I know that the farmer in question, who one of the farmers that I've been speaking to, chose not to put insurance on his crop because the yield is so low to actually trigger. You mentioned you put it into the formula and nothing comes out. And the yield was so low to actually trigger any insurance payments. Like, if I remember right, his break even is about 4 metric tons of dried grain per acre, 68 bushels or something. And the average provincial is 1.7, I think, metric tons of per acre. So it just wasn't, so his break-even point is already twice as much as what the triggering for the insurance was, so he just chose not to do that. And the $1 million that you talked about for Dorian relief, of course, he was part of the group of farmers who applied for that. But there's about 15,000 acres of crops planted that would have been covered by that. And that works out to $66 per acre of insured crops that you would, so it's not in any way, and you said it's not going to make them whole, far from it, I get that. And I'm wondering, and Mermaid Stratford brought this up, where we are with looking at these crop insurance programs, and I appreciate your comment about I think you said that crops will eliminate themselves as they become less and less suitable for our climate here. And it's a complicated topic, and again, as Mermaid Stratford brought up, corn is, perhaps with the heat units that we're getting now, that's a crop that might be of more benefit to us, but perhaps not if we're going to get more hurricanes. So it's a complicated thing, and I'm just wondering where you are with a review of the crop insurance programs generally.
Well, it's a moving target. It's something that we continuously have to look at, because with the climate change, we're not only changing the climate, but our soil quality, we have to keep monitoring that, whether it's that'll have to come into effect in crop insurance in the future. It may be. I don't think I want to rule that out, because we have to, we can't insure a crop that's not going into healthy soil either, because that's not productive as well. So we have to really keep moving on this and keep working with Department of Environment as well. But having the climate change lens put on crop insurance is important, and I've been pushing that at the national level as well. Maybe not getting the same amount of traction as I would like, but we're moving in that direction. I really think that crop insurance is important for the industry, important for farmers, but we continuously have to keep the targets. They can't stay the same.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks. And just to dig down a little bit more on the comment you made about crops eliminating themselves, and I appreciate what you're saying when you use that phrase. Were you thinking of any particular crops that we grow here currently on PEI, or this varieties of crops rather
I think
than
it's
the crop itself?
I shouldn't have said probably crops. I should have said varieties of crops. Would more likely be eliminated, but there's not one in particular. But we're going to. Corn is one that I see is the varieties. There's so many varieties out there and so many opportunities that you really have to know which will work on Prince Edward Island, and because it's changing. So,
Leader of the Opposition.
I'm good, thank you, Chair.
Welcome. Shall this section carry?
No,
sorry, Mermaid Stratford.
Sorry about that, thank you. So throughout the Dorian relief process, one of the questions, and I asked at the time, shortly after Dorian happened and the relief programs were being pushed out, there was the Red Cross was administering and taking calls, right? That's where we were told to direct people if they didn't have crop insurance at that time. Do you know how many farmers actually had a claim through the Red Cross program that were successful in getting that?
I think Mary has those.
I may have those statistics. I don't have the statistics on all farms. I think we were just looking at the corn and cranberry. Through disaster relief, PEI Disaster Financial Relief Fund, that was through the Red Cross. I don't have the numbers for all farmers here. I was just looking at, because of Dorian, I was looking at the corn and cranberry piece, and there were 4 producers that received funding at that point.
Between Red Cross and Dorian, there was $4 million given out. I think $3 million for crop insurance and just under $1 million for Red Cross.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thanks, Chair. So did you ask, though, Red Cross to provide data on how many applications they received and how many were successful versus rejected, and how much, like, what was actually paid out?
There would be data on that because we would have to have that information when it comes to the risk management suite of programs as it is. So yes, that data is available.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
And is that something you can bring back?
I can check.
Great, thank you.
Mermaid Stratford.
So one of the concerns, and I mean, feedback I'll give you, I think I said this at the time, like, farmers were spending hours on the phone, and I had one gentleman tell me, like, the stack of paperwork that he had to submit was incredible, right? The amount of information that he had to provide. It was all about, his farming, historical information, all that kind of stuff. And it was also around, crop insurance yields, et cetera. It was just an extensive amount of information that he had to pull together in a very difficult time, because he was also trying to, harvest a crop that wasn't harvestable. So do we have any sense of how we can make those programs more easier for farmers to access? As we know, like, that's for the amount of money that you're probably going to get back.
We have crop insurance, and that's what we manage is crop insurance.
Yes.
Red Cross was an emergency program that was a federal program, so Red Cross were in charge of directing it, but it was a federal program that we took on to apply in a hurry. So it's an emergency response program. So we had no control on the applications or anything. So.
Mermaid Stratford.
Or the level of service that was provided to farmers at the time.
Well, we have crop insurance, which we provided. We provide good insurance.
Mermaid Stratford.
Yes, but not all farmers, as we just spoke, had crop insurance.
But they
on
have
corn.
opportunity to buy crop insurance. Every farmer has an opportunity to buy crop insurance. If they choose not to, that's a business risk management decision.
Mermaid Stratford.
Yes, I understand that, but there was also direction that if you didn't have crop insurance, to go to the Red Cross program. My question though was, did you get any feedback on the level of service that your farmers were provided when that happened, so that when we go through this process again, if farmers were spending 12 hours on the phone trying to get through a program?
Never got any feedback.
Okay,
Member Stratford?
I'm good, thank you, Chair.
Shall the section carry? Total farm business risk management, $18,627,200. Shall it carry? Agriculture resources. Agriculture Resources Division Management. Appropriations provided for the management and support of the Agriculture Resources Division. Administration, $14,300. Equipment, $4,000. Materials, supplies, and services, $7,800. Professional services, $24,000. Salaries, $174,800. Travel and training, $44,800. Grants, $375,100. Total Agriculture Resource Division Management, $644,800. O'Leary and Verness.
Minister, see once again your professional services, you spent a fair bit of money on your forecast, but now you're going back to last year. So what was the extra professional services that were spent this year? I mean, maybe this goes back to the computer issues for that section, I'm not sure, but.
Well, our spending in professional services does vary from year to year, so we set up a budget, and sometimes we go, it goes over, and sometimes we're under. There were some consulting for services related to an policy response to COVID. There was a project for that. The Farm Practice Review Board is here, and so any costs related to legal services for the Farm Practice Review Board is here. There was a soil branding initiative. We have it's called Soil First.
Yeah.
Something the minister may talk to at one point. We developed an app for the dairy beef pilot. There's a dairy beef pilot. And there was some consulting services, kind of looking overall on the beef industry and price insurance, that type of thing. Yeah.
O'Leary and Verness.
So who are the consultants that you hired on the beef strategy and the price assurance? Just to give me a sense of what's the name of the company or the
MRSB.
MRSB. Okay.
O'Leary and Verness.
On the section on salaries there, you've didn't spend as much money on salary. I think I know where the issue might be, but you're still going to be under what you forecast last year to spend. And I know up in my area, there's been one of the staff people that has had a health issue, and nobody seems to have filled that vacancy. Not that I'm saying a permanent vacancy, but even on a temporary basis. Is there any intention? And is that the section on professional resources management?
This wouldn't be the section that position that you're speaking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In this division, we had vacancies in a couple of positions for a period of time. And then so next year you see it's down again, when normally you'd see it up because the collective agreement changes, but the positions were filled at lower steps, so that's why you're seeing them.
Okay.
O'Leary and Verness.
And the other section I have is on grants. There's quite a sizable increase in grants in that budgetary section. What are the new grants, or do you have to decide what the new programs are going to be, or any light that you could shed on this section would be helpful?
That's an increase to the public trust program. Last year, the public trust program, we had moved a lot of money around in our Canadian agricultural programs. That's our federal provincial programming.
Yeah.
So last year we moved a lot of money around when it came to COVID. So we'd moved a lot of money into one particular program to deal with some COVID issues. So money has been moved, assigned back this year. So the money came back that was moved out of public trust last year, and we've actually increased this budget overall from the last couple of years, and it's to expand on the ag awareness activities and target marketing and communications efforts. for that public trust program.
O'Leary Inverness.
So these grants are just to promote the safety in agriculture as far as food production and things of that nature? Is that the idea? And would these grants be something that farmers can access, or is it more farm groups that are accessing this?
It's public trust program is Federation of Agriculture, looks after this program.
O'Leary Inverness.
Okay, well, I think that explains it a little more. I will ask more on what's the situation on that position in O'Leary, whatever section it's in, and Mary can maybe identify that later on.
Okay, could you identify what section it is now? Is that possible?
I can.
Just so we'll be aware of it when it comes up.
Is Billy?
Yeah,
It's Billy. It's Billy, but those positions got moved, that's why I'm just checking.
Yeah, no problem.
I believe it's in the next one, in sustainable agriculture.
Okay. Thank you. Mermaid Stratford.
Great, thanks, Chair. On the dairy beef pilot, can you tell me how long that pilot is intended to run?
3 years. A year?
I'm not certain, Minister.
At least a year, to get some data collected and, yeah.
Mermaid Stratford.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And my understanding is it's been going for a while now. How long, when did you establish the pilot?
Well, we started working on it last year, but it didn't get off the ground until this spring. I'm not sure when the first calves went into it, but it was this winter sometime. And so I'm not sure, I'd have to get the data on how many calves are in the system now, but that they're collecting data on.
Mermaid Stratford.
And you don't think it started until this winter? I thought it was well before
It was
that.
underway, but I don't think they purchased the first bunch of calves went through until last fall, or I'll have to find out.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
What's the budget on that pilot?
Mary, do you know?
I don't have the breakdown here of what the expenses are for that particular project for this fiscal year. Last year, there was just, and I'm not sure, like there was about $1,750 there, but I'm not sure if something fell into one of the larger programs for it. I'd have to bring that back.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
Yeah, I'd like to understand that whole pilot, and a couple other questions, and I don't know if you have the information with you, but would be, how long is the pilot supposed to go for, and what outcomes have you seen so far? So, and what is your plan on reporting back on that? And what's your measurements of success? I basically would love to see, similar to the Land Matters PEI, what's your project plan on it, and how do you determine if it was successful or not? Okay.
We'll get that back.
Thank you, I'd love that. And also I would love to know how the farms were chosen to participate in that pilot program. And, was it?
It's volunteer.
Okay. On the public trust piece, so that increased to 214,000, is that a new resource? Is it funding for just a new resource?
That's 60,000 to the
Federation of Agriculture.
Yeah, to the Federation of Agriculture, who runs the food trust, we gave 60,000 for another position for a year. So just to increase public trust awareness, we find that's one of the things that is really important in agriculture, and we want to support Federation. I thought they were doing a great job, but they can even do more. So.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you. And how is that candidate selected?
I'm not sure.
Mermaid Stratford.
So when we give $60,000 to an organization that's doing a hiring process, are you familiar with the hiring process?
With Federation of Agriculture hiring process?
How would they normally post for the position, or is it?
I'm not sure.
Mermaid Stratford.
So is it something, though, that is an open hiring process, or is it a position that's selected by somebody?
We had an individual that we thought would work, so that's where we offered this money for.
Mermaid Stratford?
So we offered $60,000 for an individual that worked. What was the skill set of that individual, and who determined that it would work?
The Federation of Agriculture. It was their decision.
Mermaid Stratford?
So was it publicly posted?
I'm not sure.
Mermaid Stratford?
Can you bring that back? Sure. And what were the parameters and the skill set that was required for the individual that was hired?
Okay.
Okay,
Mermaid Stratford?
I'm good, thank you, Chair.
Shall the session carry?
Carry.
Sustainable agriculture. Appropriations provided to assist the farm community with programs and services which support sustainable agriculture practices. Administration, $15,900. Equipment, $9,700. Material supplies and services, $38,900. Professional services, $13,200. Salaries, $1,014,100. Travel and training, $38,900. Grants, $2,415,100. Total sustainable agriculture, $3,545,800. O'Leary and Vaness?
It's kind of the same questions again. I guess there's a fair cut in equipment, so I mean, is that computer related, or what would be the reasoning for what equipment is? You increased your spending over what was estimated for last year, and then now you're cutting it back down to paltry amounts. I'm just wondering what aren't you purchasing for equipment in sustainable agriculture?
Last year, or this year, we had a one-time project through Environment and Climate Change Canada for weather station upgrade equipment.
Oh, okay.
So that was federally funded. So it's decreased on our expenditure side and on our revenue side. So we're just back to our normal budget.
O'Leary and Vaness?
So that's not a new weather station, it's an upgrade of all the weather stations, or a specific weather station?
I believe it was upgrading like the data loggers within, like the equipment within a number of the weather stations.
Yeah.
O'Leary and Vaness?
I know one thing I would certainly suggest to the minister. I mean, we have a fair number of weather stations across the island, but we're seeing weather patterns becoming more varied, I guess, and it was certainly brought up in my area just with weather station. I know there's one in O'Leary, I think there's another one in the Tyne Valley area, and then way down to Summerside. And there's some farmers that didn't get their potential payouts, I guess, based on hay, forage. It's because it's very much based on weather. So I'm just wondering, the minister, is there any plans to add more weather stations to across the island, or do you see any spots that are voids where there maybe should be a weather station?
Well, I see an opportunity to work with, in which we are in discussions with the University of Prince Edward Island with their climate change lab. They have, I'm not sure how many weather stations, but it adds to the total across Prince Edward Island. So we are starting conversations with them. We hope to be able to use their data. And yeah, we're obviously, it's important that we look at adding more weather stations as well, and different pockets.
O'Leary and Vaness?
Yeah, and I think my point would be is that it's really about accuracy. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose on a weather station as far as, just when you're a certain distance apart. And I will commend the department. They have made some good policy changes that it's more the weather stations relating to the field, not where the farm base is. That was one issue that I know when I was minister we had run into. But and I also understand that there are processes in determining weather stations, and you have to get approvals from the federal government and crop insurance and things of that nature. But I would certainly encourage the minister to look at some of those areas and sort of see where there would be some, because I think in the end of the day, farmers just want accuracy. They when you get situations where one particular farm didn't get a payout, but they had, and because they had rain and another one did, but they had to both of them same weather station, and you've probably been there yourself, Minister, and that's so the more accurate. I know there's limitations of how accurate you can get, but
yep. But I think with today's technology, we need to try to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
O'Leary and Vaness.
And the other question I had, I guess, just once again, is around salaries. We see an increase in salaries there. So is there an additional position being added, or is this just the average increase? Yeah, because I know previous questions, it sort of said that there was new people starting at lower positions. Is this a case where everybody's into higher positions, or?
This is salary increments and benefits, and then there were a couple of positions in this unit that we reclassified, yes, to higher levels.
Right.
Paul Larry Inverness.
And I guess my final would be the same thing was about the grants there. You've once again got a sizable increase on grants. So is there anything specific in the grants program that you're offering to farmers for the future in this section?
So one of the things we're looking at is the regenerative agriculture in our community pastures.
Oh, yeah.
There's, I believe 7 community pastures. You probably, a lot of them
Yeah,
up west.
I've got a couple
actually.
in my district.
There's almost 10,000 acres, just shy of 10,000 acres in community pastures that we are now, part of our livestock strategy is asking if we're going to support them if they want to do regenerative agriculture style of pasturing, and we're going to support them. And I believe we have 2 right now that are showing interest in doing this. So our department's staff are going to help them with this, launch this project, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
So.
Or Inverness.
Actually, Minister, that sounds very exciting, and I'm really happy to hear it. And I do think it plays a role in developing a livestock strategy, because my observation would be is that you have a fair significant amount of land. It's probably underutilized by livestock producers, but I think a lot of it is that they do need to upgrade their their pasture management skills so they can have more cattle per acre, so to speak. So when you're looking at some of these grants that are going to be going, or community pastures would be eligible for it, is there anything that's going to be for a private farmer to increase, improve his stocking rate per acre or anything like that?
That's something we're going to look at. It's not going to be in this budget because we want to use the as kind of a test pilot, our community pastures. If we can get them, I'd love to hire a dedicated staff for regenerative agriculture, regenerative pasturing on Prince Edward Island. And if we can get a specialist or even students coming on board for the summer months to work on this, I think there's a great opportunity there. I think we can improve our stocking numbers. We're underutilizing our land right now, and we have to get those now. And we need the livestock, we need the manure, we need the regenerative agriculture. So it's a win-win. So.
Or Larry Inverness.
Just to add to that, is there? I would encourage you to understand that, and I'm sure you do as a farmer, but a lot of the community pastures, they're beef producers that put cattle out there. They're not making large amounts of money. It's sometimes difficult for them to invest lots into land that's not their own. So I would hope that those grants would be fairly reflective of that cost reality. So in other words, 50-50 grants may not always work in community pastures.
I think going forward, we have to get it started.
Right, and get a fairly high percentage from government funds to
get it established, and then once it's established, hopefully if it's designed right, it will run itself.
Yeah.
Larry Inverness.
I thank you for that, Minister, and I'm really appreciative of that initiative, and I think that's something that's going to go a long way to a livestock strategy. So I applaud you for your ambition on that. Thanks.
Mermaid Stratford.
Great, thank you, Chair. And I'm going to just continue on off that. I mean, you have a phenomenal resource within the department. I watched a video Adam McLean did where he doesn't call himself a sheep farmer. He basically calls himself a grass farmer because it's all about, through drought, how do you maintain those deep-rooted grasses so that there's still vegetation and everything. And it was a really done video. Yeah. And I think that that's something like to share widely, and those types of exercises to show people like what does the practice look like, because it is new, right? So in order to be able to champion regenerative agriculture, we need to be able to provide that expertise for somebody who's already doing it. So I thought that was an excellent video. It wasn't the department who did that, it was another organization. I forget who it was, but certainly a great organization.
I'm just trying
going, keep going.
I'm hearing right.
Honourable members, we're having difficulty hearing. Could you just please your conversations down a little bit, or take them to the side by our side? Mermaid Stratford?
Sorry.
I have my earpiece in, so it's not bothering me. So that's one agriculture practice that you're promoting. What other sustainable agriculture practices are you looking to put in? As we know, the lead time for farmers to mitigate and adapt for climate change is long. So what other practices are you implementing?
So we have the greenhouse gas mitigation pilot program. That's the program to utilize funding provided by the federal government, and we're to sequester carbon. So that's one of the projects. Then we have the agriculture stewardship program that we always have, and we're adding some more money to it. There's a huge uptake in that, and we want to take as much advantage of it as well. We're adding more money to that on at-risk structures first. Before it was first come, first serve, which there's still going to be a portion of that because we don't want to punish farmers that are trying to do good things, but we're going to identify some at-risk fields and watersheds that need this work immediately, so that there's funding set aside for that. One of our initiatives is soil first farming that we're coming out with. It's integrated measurement-based approach that supports soil health, that recognizes farmers and as caretakers of the island's most important resources are soil. So we want to identify those farmers that are doing a fantastic job with their soil. We want to keep the soil in the field, build the quality of the soil. So we want to recognize farmers that are doing that, because we hear all the bad stories, but there's a lot of good stories, and we want to recognize those farmers that are doing soil first farming. And so that's an initiative that we're building on, and we're going to work with these farmers to invest time and money and resources to help their soil, build healthy soil. Educate, it's all important. So,
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you. I'm going to drill down on a couple of those. For the greenhouse gas mitigation program, can you elaborate on what that is? So is that kind of a program like what we see in California, where they're paying farmers to put aggregate or like manures and compost back into their land and paying them to do it? Or is that some other program that you're looking at?
It's the program will utilize, I'll just read the funding provided by the Federal Low Carbon Economy Fund. It will focus on incentivizing beneficial management practices. So that's what it's to help sequester carbon. Any practices used to sequester carbon it's going to be applied for the funding. So. And it's a federal provincial shared.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. And how much is going into that?
Mary, do you?
$214,100.
And that's our share.
Sorry, 50-50 share, did you say, or 40-60?
That's 100% of the expenditure there.
Okay.
It's 214.1 is 100% of that's what will be spent this year.
Okay.
It's 1 year. Hoping that it can be extended, but right now that's the end of the agreement.
Mermaid Stratford.
Close.
He's next on my list. He's next on my list.
So 214,000, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. Like when you think about this is a centerpiece, right, of what the throne speech said and that kind of thing, right? And agriculture does need to be right in the heart of that whole process of reaching our targets.
Right.
So,
but a lot of our stewardship programs, this is adding on to our stewardship programs. So it's just the beginning. I hope it's that's going to build off this, so.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford?
And is it, so do you have the 3-year spending on that? Like, is it a ramping up program that or is it a one-time spend? Or?
This is a one-year pilot, and then make determinations beyond that. But right now, it's a one-year pilot.
Mermaid Stratford?
Okay, and so I'm just trying to understand, like, is it an application process and farmers are gonna understand how, like, what project types are gonna be, which, like, will be allowed under this funding? And then anybody can apply for it, and is there limits of application amounts and?
I'll have to get the details on that for you.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
Mermaid Stratford?
And do you have a start date on it? Like, is it something that's coming out of the gates, like, right in April?
It's going to be launched with our winter cap programming is due to be renewed this year. It'll be coming with that.
And what's it, sorry?
Mermaid Stratford?
That's April every.
April 1st.
Yeah.
So it's right in the beginning.
Yeah.
And we're at March 23rd, so I would love to see what the programming behind that is so that we can understand that a little clearer. I like, but Minister, I like your idea about the agriculture stewardship program and identifying those important high-risk areas. I think that that's a very, an excellent way to look at this. And is the watersheds included in identifying those fields, or who's identifying?
So we work closely with the Ag Watershed Group.
Yeah.
That they will be identifying some of these properties, yes.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford? Sorry, Mermaid Stratford.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks, Chair. And this was something that we had asked for the funding to be doubled, because what we were hearing from farmers was that the day that it was launched, at 8 o'clock in the morning, they were trying to get their applications in, and if you didn't do it within 2 to 3 minutes, it was pretty much you weren't going to get funding, which identified that we were severely underfunding this type of program.
And we were missing the at-risk.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I love the fact that you're prioritizing that, and there might even be another priority where farmers who have never accessed it before, right? It might be interesting to look at those farmers as well to see why haven't they accessed it? Are they aware of it being there, or were they just not there at 8:01? Right, and hitting the send button, or did they have rural internet, right, and couldn't actually apply?
That's somebody else's problem.
I have a lot of other questions. I'll go back on the end if you don't mind, but I don't mind passing it.
Morel Dona.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. I was really excited to see about this same program that Mermaid Stratford was speaking about, the GHG mitigation pilot program. In the background information that your department has provided, and I thank you very much for doing that. I know a lot of work goes into that. They talk about such activities will include, and they list a whole bunch of things. One is no-till planting methods, installing manure storage covers, all types of things. I guess a few questions. One, with the federal government providing $152,000 and your department providing $62,500, where does the, who has the final decision-making authority over where that investment will go? Is it provincial department says, yes, we'll decide where this goes, or does there have to be any federal oversight? Basically, I'm wondering, like, if you want to use all that money to provide compost so we can draw down more carbon, can we do that?
It's the department's discretion, but it has to meet certain standards of the federal spending, but it's under our discretion.
Morel Dona.
Thank you, Chair. Could you bring back those federal standards, or what restrictions will we put on this type of program?
Sure.
Morel Dona.
Thank you. Our Special Standing Committee on Climate Change has looked into this a lot, and Mermaid Stratford had spoken about some of the things that California was doing. You have, in your background information, you've listed a number of activities. I see, it's 214,000. That's great. Obviously, more is always better. If that's what we're looking at this year, I'd like to bring it back to when I was questioning the Minister of Environment on the rebates for electric vehicles, so to speak. This was before the budget, but we had talked about how, in our first couple of years of really trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, or sequester carbon, which is what your department will be doing a lot of. the impact we have in years 1 and 2 are really, really important. And so that's why I was pushing hard to get, used vehicles in there, because we're not going to get a whole lot of influx of new vehicles right away, but if we can get used vehicles in, that's going to matter a lot. So I guess my question to you is, with your activities, and we've talked a lot about carbon abatement costs at our committee, has your department, or will your department, look at the different types of activities, but rank them on where your best bang for your buck is on carbon abatement costs? So if it's applying compost, put like to say, well, this is how much this is going to cost and per greenhouse gas emission reduced, so to speak. And these are all great ideas, but if we've got a limited amount in our first year or two, I think it's really important that we put that money where our biggest bang for our buck is to our whole net zero plan to getting there. So and I appreciate this program is developed based on the Federation of Agriculture's report that they have produced too. And like I say, there's real good soil management practices that we can do, but not all of them will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as much as some. And if we've got a limited amount, I think in the first couple of years, we really need to focus on the programs that give us our best bang for our buck with greenhouse gas emissions if we have any chance of meeting our aggressive targets. And then we'll also say, yep, we need to do all these other things too, but maybe we find another pot for that. So I guess that's a long way of saying, will your department really look at the abatement costs for the types of activities that this program will fund?
Absolutely, absolutely. The department. This is a movement in this department. It's a movement that has shifted to a focus of not only climate change but carbon sequestration. I hope, before I'm done, that the Department of Agriculture of Prince Edward Island will sit in front of a standing committee of California state legislature, because I think the work that this department has done and is going to do, agriculture here on the island is going to be the solution to our target challenges. And I can't wait to that day when the California state legislature calls us looking for us to present to them. So that's a goal of mine, and I will get that data, and we will focus. It's a movement. Farmers have accepted it. Farmers are moving that direction, and I look forward to it. It's going to be exciting times ahead, and we got targets to hit.
Morel Dona?
Well said, Minister. That's the kind of that's what you want to hear from Minister championing this type of file, saying this is the movement. And you're right. I've learned a wild amount in this past year and a half of being on this committee. I was pretty ignorant to the whole situation. I thought I knew, but I really didn't know. And in agriculture is, you talk about best bang for your buck, all the things that we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or carbon capture is incredibly good for our soil too. So you hear that over and over and over again, right? It's win-win, in a big way. So I really appreciate hearing that mentality. I'm good. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that same program here, in the details it mentions that it's based on a report developed by the Federation of Agriculture called Developing Best Practices to Reduce or Remove Greenhouse Gas Emission on Island Farms. I did Google for that and looked on the government's website. I couldn't find the report. I'm wondering if you could table that report for us.
Sure.
Summerside South Drive.
The next question has to do with the CAP Agricultural Steward Program and the details around that. It lists a bunch of example projects and the numbers of them that are there. And I'm just wondering why some of them are zeros. Are those projects that were someone applied for and didn't follow through, or is that just an empty placeholder of a project that could have been someday?
If somebody had applied, they would have been, that is one of the
That's a complete list.
practices. Yeah, that's a complete list, and we just didn't have anybody apply that year.
Summerside South Drive.
That's all for me.
Summerside Wilman.
Chair. So I'm going to jump off of what a number of my colleagues have all over the House, greenhouse gas mitigation pilot. I'm sure you're not super shocked on that, Minister. One thing I would like to just say, having been involved with the Special Committee on Climate Change, when we reached out to your department to get information on the carbon abatement costs, I will say, Minister, your department was one of the fastest to actually get us information and to get us information we could use. So I would like to commend you on that publicly, because that...
I feel there's a but coming.
That was an incredible challenge with some other locations, I'm not going to lie to you, and your department got back to us in 10 days with good numbers, so thank you for that. It gives me confidence that this is something your department really wants to tackle, and hearing what you're saying in the House, I have to say, also gives me confidence in that. I hope that we're able to see that matched with action. There's so much potential. In the last couple of years working on this committee, we have learned so much about the potential for our soils to sequester carbon, and you had said earlier you hope the opportunity presents itself in the future that you can be talking to another state or province about the incredible things being done here.
California, actually.
California specifically, exactly. We heard from California, and one of the really interesting takeaways that we got as a result of that discussion is that different soils will sequester different amounts of carbon. So they have measured the carbon sequestering capacity in, for example, Maine, and they have it listed as about 2 tons per acre is the potential for drawdown with certain practices. But in parts of California, they have that measured at 4 tons of carbon per acre. If you consider the fact that we have 600,000 acres of farmland on PEI, you can quickly imagine how excited I am about the potential for how this could really move us forward. But I like data. I like to know that what we're doing is moving us forward. And I wonder if you can give me a sense of how many tons of carbon you are assessing PEI soils can sequester per acre.
I'll have to bring that back. I have some very capable people in the department that could give you that answer, and I'll make sure that they supply that answer for you. And I do want to agree with you. There's a huge opportunity here, and you should be excited about the opportunity that agriculture presents. And I am in conversation with the Minister of Environment and Energy because we can sequester carbon all day long, but we still have to be profitable as farmers. Agriculture, the best practices have to pay for themselves. So we have to look at ways that we can not subsidize, but our farmers can benefit from their practices by getting weather. So we're working with the Department of Environment on carbon credits. I'd love to be able to, our blueberry industry, make extra money from selling carbon credits. And that's the direction that I think, instead of government subsidizing for doing this work, I think there's a huge opportunity that we can be self-sufficient in doing that, and it'll save us money in the long run, and it'll be good for everybody in the industry. So that's the direction we're pushing, and it's new. It's new. First conversation we had with the department a year ago, they had to scratch their head and see where we go. But the minister here is committed to doing this, so we're moving that direction.
Summerside Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. I love the idea of carbon credits. I think that's exciting. I think it certainly has the potential to be exciting. I think NORI is an example of a program that exists elsewhere that pays farmers for doing this work, and I 100% agree with you. It should be profitable for farmers to be making these investments, and we should be ensuring that it's profitable for farmers to be making these investments because we all benefit from it. When you start measuring the carbon abatement costs, you say, what did you spend? How much carbon did you pull out of the atmosphere? What did you spend per ton, right? So it gives you a really good sense of how effective we're being. Yep. And when you look at some of the actions that we're taking right now, so for example, based on the data we got from the Climate Change Secretariat, electrifying the fleet, we're spending $2,600 for every ton of carbon that we sequester. So even if we're paying farmers to sequester carbon, if you're paying them $100 a ton, you are getting a way better return on investment than other options. So I look forward to seeing the numbers that you can come back with for what you think we can draw down in our soils here, because it will allow us to do some really comprehensive modeling, compare apples to apples. And I think you should absolutely be pushing the finance minister to put more money behind this, because you've got huge potential, huge potential. Thank you, that's all.
You're welcome. Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with what Maraldona and Summerside Wilmot has been saying. And I mean, we talked about it, remember, Minister, we talked about this in your office after I came back from Connecticut, where we were talking about nori in that setting, and how farmers were being paid to carbon capture and carbon credit. So I love the fact that this is coming to fruition. I know nothing happens overnight, and it's hard to be patient.
It's going to take time, it is, yeah.
But I think that creating additional revenue streams for our farmers for doing the good work that they're already doing, and then that creates the space for them to do more of it. So if it is a beef farmer who's spreading the manures on his land and he's getting paid 100 or whatever a ton of carbon that he's capturing because he's doing that, that just allows them then to buy more beef, which, as we've heard from O'Leary and Verness, you know, like, we're trying to accomplish getting up to 20,000 head of cattle on the province, right? Like, so that all plays into what the livestock strategy is. Like, it's just a circle, and agriculture's a circle, and I feel like we're coming out of the silos.
It's an ecosystem.
It is.
And,
you can't pull from one and not.
We can't have one without the other, and we're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
It's not going to. You're right. You can't do it overnight, because we have to take inventory of what we have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't know until 4 months ago that we had 10,000 acres of community pasture on this island. That blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we found out that there's opportunities to use that 10,000 acres to sequester carbon, it's just mind-blowing the direction we can. So daily we're finding new paths and new measurements, and working with the Minister of Environment, we'll definitely find some new targets and new data to put this all together, so we can really focus on where we go in the future to hit our targets.
That's great.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the other areas in our budget submission, we had asked for money to be put in for renewables to help subsidize farmers to move from, from using heavy amounts of electricity over to doing renewables in order to offset the costs there. And we've heard from, the dairy farmers of Prince Edward Island, and from the Federation of Agriculture, and many other advocacy groups for agriculture, that one of the challenges is how when you put it on, your biggest barn is usually your least amount of electricity draw, but that's where you want to put, renewables, and we've heard about challenges with windmills on the properties and that kind of thing. Can you elaborate more on how farmers from that perspective will play a part in modernizing our electricity policies here in PEI?
So we met with the Federation of Agriculture, we met with the Dairy Farmers PEI, we met with Maritime Electric, and one of the major concerns that came from each one of those farming groups was the uncertainty of how efficient they are now. So in my conversation with the Minister of Environment and Energy, farmers are asking us for energy audits so they know where they sit, are they efficient, can they be more efficient? So the minister, we decided we're going to pay for energy audits. That was in the budget. Yeah, and I think it's in environment's budget. So farmers will know their energy use. My vision of energy renewables in the farming community is around a community-based. I mean, there's individuals that went energy with the wind energy and they got burned on it. They went as individuals. I think if we took the approach of going as a collaborative industry or collaborative areas, communities, farming areas, I mean, we have solar, we have wind, but we also have methane. There's so many opportunities of renewables that I want to explore with the minister, and I think we need a buy-in from groups or communities so we can have sustainable energy for that moving forward. But the first thing we want to do is find out how efficient we are. And Maritime Electric talked about three-phase power, the opportunities that can create more efficiency on farms. So we wanted to take a deep dive into how accessible that is for a lot of our farms. And so that's the path we're taking.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Which is all good, but as the member from Raldona stated, what you do in the first 2 to 3 years really increases and it takes you leaps and bounds of what you're going to accomplish in the next 5 or 10 years. So, I mean, once a farmer has had that energy audit, is there any funding then for them to access so that they can get started while you're doing all of the other farms? Like, just to say, okay, this year all we're going to do is energy audits and then not have funding for them to get the ball rolling, right? Is basically putting them in a holding pattern. So
there is programming now, and I think in the Department of Energy, they have that funding now. So, and we're just going to build on it. My conversations with the minister is, we're going to move leaps and bounds on that very quickly. So.
Mermaid Stratford.
Right, and what we heard about the programs now, those are set for residential implementations, right? Not for much larger implementations. So is there appetite to look at a program that's actually designed for farmers, meeting them where they are in order to get them rolling this year and not making them wait, right? Like, I understand that we have a programming in, but from the farmers I've talked about, the cost for them the upfront cost for them is so cost prohibitive because they're not programs that are designed for farmers on that bigger scale. It's for residential. So have you looked at so once we do these energy audits and we have to subsidize them by this much, what program would work for them, meeting them where they are?
We're in that process, and we are going to move quickly on this, and but we want to to make sure we do it right, and because electricity is, the second block really does work for the industry, and we want to make sure that the agriculture industry doesn't get burned again with the wind industry. So there's so many opportunities and so many different farmers I've spoken with, and the groups I've spoken with. When you talk about corn salesmen, renewable energy salesmen are the same. They don't necessarily trust them because the farmer is not an expert in it. So they're relying on a third party on a huge investment. So farmers just have that insecurity right now. So with the energy audits and the specialists in the energy department to guide us through this, I think is the right approach, because you don't want to spend a whole lot of money and get burned again. So that's where we're going.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thanks, Chair. Once bitten, twice shy, right, Minister? That's basically, essentially.
That's a song, I think, isn't it?
I would, but the challenge with that is we're already at a point, right, where let's find a pilot, somebody that can pilot then, or let's find, you know, maybe it's at the oh my gosh, I lost it, you know, by Brackley, we talked about it earlier, Hamilton, no, what's that? Yeah, the research facilities out in Harrington, thank you. You know, why don't we look at, or someplace that is a fairly large draw, put the pilot in so that we can then prove a proof of concept to farmers, right? To give them that comfort level of doing it. And I'm sure that there's farmers already that have done it and using them as that, you know, I don't want to call it a guinea pig, but you know what I mean, like, it's the proof of concept, and it's, with anything that we do, we need to have proof of concept in order to build confidence in that. And seeing that we're doing it in so many different areas, and we have such an opportunity with farmers to let them be the people in the community that is actually collecting all the renewable and then selling it back, right? Like, that's another revenue stream that I see as a huge potential, and I've heard people talking about this in the 2015 election, right? Like, why aren't we doing more with renewables and allowing many people from a community, like the sustainable community idea? So lots of people are early adopters, and I understand that that a lot of farmers aren't early adopters and need that proof of concept, but can we commit to rolling out an initiative to actually show that and test that? Because I think that would be a great place to start, and something that the government should actually invest in, to do that instead of a farmer then maybe having to take that hit. Let us do it.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
Roommate Stratford.
So we, one of the other budget asks we had was around soil health, and we'd asked for $1 million over 3 years for soil health and carbon sequestration. How is that reflected in the budget, in the soil health? I know we do soil health tests, and those are free. Are they going to continue to be free to farmers?
They're another year free.
Another year free?
And we're going to promote it even more, so we want to encourage.
Okay. And is there anything additional around the soil health and carbon, other than what we've talked about here? Is there anything else?
I think we've covered a lot of what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay.
Honorable members, I'll just wait for him to respond, and then we're going to move on to the next order of business for the day. So did you have a response, more of a response to that, Minister, or that's it? Okay. So we can move on now to.
Okay. Do I adjourn debate or something?
No.
Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall I carry? Carry.
I didn't get a thank you. Just you got the thank you. Thanks, Eric.
I'll grab it.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, having under consideration the grant of supply to Her Majesty, I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry?
I don't have the order document.
Motion 7. The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Mr. Speaker, the official opposition calls order, motion 7.
Shall it carry?
Motion number 7, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition moves, seconded by the Honourable Member for Mermaid Stratford, the following motion. Whereas agriculture has been a prominent aspect of the island economy, society, and identity for generations. And whereas the ongoing success of this sector is critical for the continued health and prosperity for both rural and urban communities. And whereas sustainability refers to long-term strength in environmental, social, and economic areas. And whereas farm incomes have been volatile in recent years. And whereas significant environmental pressures are being felt across Prince Edward Island as a result of some current farming practices. And whereas climate change has already had a dramatic impact on island farmers and will continue to do so in the future. And whereas the many challenges faced by island producers have had a detrimental effect on the mental health of many farmers and their families and communities. Therefore be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly urge government to adopt an agricultural plan that supports island farmers in forging a prosperous and sustainable future, economically, socially, and environmentally for farming on Prince Edward Island.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition to start debate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and speak to Motion 7 this afternoon, particularly since we've just had a really excellent, illuminating conversation with the Minister of Agriculture over the budget over the last hour and a half or so. Mr. Speaker, I can't think of anything that more clearly defines our province than agriculture. It has shaped our landscape, our society, our economy, and indeed our provincial character. And that old adage that there is nothing more constant than the presence of change is particularly true when it comes to farming on Prince Edward Island. Back in 1900, which is just over a century ago, there were 14,000 farms, and their average size was about 87 acres. 85% of the island population of 103,000 people back then lived in rural areas. Almost all of those farms were mixed family farms where a great variety of crops and livestock were being produced. And during that time, the terms islander and farmer were essentially practically synonymous. Almost everybody was a farmer. And although we perhaps never came in reality to be the million-acre farm, over 500,000 acres were actually devoted to field crops back then in 1900. And today, of course, things are very different. We have about 10% of the number of farms present today than were back then. There's less than 1,500 farms now compared to 14,000 at the turn of the last century. And the average size of those farms has increased a lot. It's 5 times what it was back then. About 450 acres is the average size of the island farm now. Still small by global standards, I understand that, but still 5 times what the average size of an island farm was back in 1900. We've seen constant change and several profound upheavals in agriculture over the last few generations, including a really profound one, the emergence of potatoes as the dominant crop here starting in around the 1920s. Many commodities and cash crops such as tobacco and silver foxes have come and gone. And from a business that was almost entirely local and regional in its reach, producers and supply lines are now global in scale. And they're operating in a marketplace that is more impacted by subsidies and tariffs and protections and other distortions than probably any other sector of the economy. But our northern climate and our island boundaries, which both increase pest resistance, and our island soils, which are suitable for root crops, mean that potatoes remain as a central part of farming on Prince Edward Island. New varieties, of course, have replaced the original island blue, for example, such as the Irish cobbler, Green Mountains, and the ubiquitous russet Burbanks, which are not ideally suited to perhaps the future climate here. They don't do well in heat. They have a long growing season. They're susceptible to wireworm, all things which I know that growers and people who do R&D on this are looking at new varieties to replace the russet Burbank. But despite that, all of these new varieties, we went from about 50,000 acres grown in potatoes in the 1920s to, well, they reached their peak in 1984, I think it was, at 100,000 acres of potatoes being grown across this province. And it's dropped back now to the mid 80,000 acres, I think is what, I spoke with the potato board just the other day, actually, and I think the forecast is for just over 80,000 acres of potatoes to be planted in PEI this year. But no matter how many things changed on the farm itself, there were some constants, some universal challenges that were felt by all island farmers, past and present. Market fluctuations, disease, shortage of storage capacity, tariffs, and a generally distorted global marketplace, yields that were not predictable, bumper crops that were no guarantee of big profits, and of course, the vagaries of weather, which has become naturally an increasingly worrisome aspect of farming today. This motion number 7 on sustainable agriculture, calls on this assembly to, and I quote, urge government to adopt an agricultural plan that supports island farmers in forging a prosperous and sustainable future, economically, socially, and environmentally, for farming on Prince Edward Island. Now, my guess is that practically every session of this assembly since it was formed, has had a motion of some kind similar to the one before us today. Farming has always been a tough way to make a living, and while there absolutely have been some good times in the past, it's also a past that's been littered with uncertainty, with anxiety, and with hard times. If there was a surefire formula for farmers and governments to overcome the inconsistencies and the trials inherent in agriculture, we would have come up with that long ago. And as we sit here today, the same volatility in prices, in growing conditions, and access to land and to markets are causing severe stresses on our farmers and on our island itself. The Minister was talking a little while ago about the mental health challenges faced by farmers here on Prince Edward Island, and the Farmer Assistance Program, of course, is a wonderful asset here for growers, which offers 6 free sessions for farmers and their family members. And I think more recently, the Minister himself announced the launch of farmerstalk.ca, the site where farmers and growers and their families are encouraged to share their experiences, to open up, and to have a sort of mutual support place to go. These are all incredibly important, but they're also indicative of the stresses and the strains that island farmers are facing. So the central questions, I should say, that I think we need to be asking when it comes to the future of agriculture are these. There are 2. The first one, how can agriculture become stable, prosperous, and sustainable, both in terms of economics, socially, and also environmentally? So how can agriculture become sustainable and prosperous? The second question is, what is government's role in helping to accomplish that goal? Sustainability is one of those malleable words that can be stretched and molded to suit your purpose. So I think we have to be really careful in how we use it, especially when it's in the title of a motion and also in the only operative clause as it is in motion 7. Sustainability has been defined in many ways, but the most frequently quoted definition is from the Brundtland Report in 1987, and it states this: sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's again the most sort of widely quoted and accepted definition of what sustainability means. So when we say that we want to make farming here on Prince Edward Island sustainable, what I'm talking about is the need for farmers today to earn a decent living, to access the water and the soil resources that they need to grow their crops, and contribute to the health of society, particularly in our rural areas, all whilst making sure that the ability of future generations of farmers, and indeed all islanders, to enjoy the same opportunities is not compromised. There are a number of principles related to sustainable agriculture that we can look at through an island lens and see where we're doing well, and also where the challenges lie. So let's first look ecologically. I said sustainability was really 3-pronged: environmental, economic, and social. So let's look at it environmentally first of all. Sustainable systems, generally speaking, are characterized by having diversity. In this case, diversity of crops. In recent years, we have moved away somewhat from the dominance of potatoes, and that's a good thing. The increase in diversity is good for a whole bunch of reasons. Government funding for a crop study to identify what crops will likely do well in our future growing conditions here on Prince Edward Island in light of climate change was welcomed by the official opposition, for whom this was a budget ask. So I want to thank the Minister and this government for coming forward with the money to do a crop study to enable that greater diversity, which will give us the resilience and put us on that path to sustainability. So diversity is critical. The ongoing protection of water quality and quantity is also, of course, a critical element of sustainable agriculture. Some places in the world have been farming the same land for literally thousands of years. And that land is as productive today and healthy today as it was when their forebears first broke ground. And a large part of this ability to continuously grow food on the same land is the ability to manage water, both to distribute it when it's needed and to make sure that it does not cause harm or any harmful effects at all, such as erosion when it comes when you don't want it or in volumes that you cannot cope with. PEI is in the unusual situation of acquiring all of its water, 100% of its water from brown water sources, which makes it even more critical that we ensure the preservation of that water, not just for agriculture, but for every other aspect of island society and the economy. However, we also need to recognize that crops will not grow without water. And when we're making decisions about how to use our scarce water resources, we have to consider where our priorities lie. Water for food production is immeasurably more important than water for golf courses, for example, or car washes. The water withdrawal regulations proposed by this government don't yet reflect that. But I'm hoping that with the ongoing research on wells for agricultural use, we'll eventually get to a point where we can feel confident that we have the proper rules in place that will allow controlled and responsible use of water for agriculture. Like the management of water, soil health is fundamental to sustainable agriculture. And those same terraces I was talking about, where farming has been carried out for so many generations, hundreds and thousands of years, manage soil health with equal care. Topsoil is, for all intents and purposes, a non-renewable resource, meaning that once it's gone, it's gone. And it takes so long for topsoil to form that preserving it is absolutely foundational to sustainability. There are all kinds of examples of once fertile and prosperous lands that are now deserts. Making sure that arguably our province's most valuable natural resource, our topsoil, is protected and preserved is absolutely critical to our long-term ability to grow food on this million-acre farm. This means we will likely need to continue to increase our use of soil-building practices like reduced tillage and cover crops, and we need, my gosh, we need a livestock strategy. We also need to consider the state of our forests and of our hedgerows. These and many other factors can drastically affect the health of our soils and ultimately the sustainability of agriculture on Prince Edward Island. Many farmers have been adopting some of these techniques, but there's still so much room to improve, to innovate, and to share these new ideas and practices. Some Indigenous cultures make decisions based on how those choices will impact their community 7 generations into the future. Now that's truly long-term planning and was, I'm sure, a large part of why those cultures were able to live so well for the thousands of years that they did prior to the arrival of settler people here on Turtle Island. So many aspects of agriculture must be kept in view as we try to emulate the longevity and the success of those cultures and so many others around the world who have so much to teach us. Living in harmony with natural processes is key. So monitoring inputs, disease, management, and maintenance of soil and water are all central parts of how we will build a truly sustainable agricultural system here on Prince Edward Island. Much is being done to reduce harm and to find better ways to live in balance, coexisting with the rest of nature, but we still have so much to learn, and much work remains for us to become truly sustainable. Consumers are becoming increasingly discerning and are far more aware of where their food comes from and how it's produced. Having confidence that what we put in our bodies is safe and healthy is of increasing importance to more and more people. This presents PEI, the Food Island, with a tremendous opportunity to marry environmental sustainability with consumer demands and therefore market opportunities. And we really need to have a hard look at the economics of agriculture in our province, because the economics of the sector, of course, play a huge role in determining what happens on the farm. We need to look at, for example, access to markets for products, and here government can truly help. The school food program is one example where government procurement, whether it's for schools or hospitals or jails or whatever, if we were to source entirely local products, we would create a massively new market for island producers, boosting the economy and providing and creating those markets for island farmers. That's one thing, that just access to markets is critical. Secondly, value added, focusing on regional and local needs with export, of course. And sometimes people have listened to what I have said and other Green Party members over the years and say, oh, they want to do away with export. They don't understand what the economics of agriculture is. And that's not at all what we're saying. We're just saying we need to have a rebalancing. We need to understand that a sustainable future for agriculture will include export, of course, but it has to be primarily and focused on local and regional supply, high value, low volume, value-added products which bear that wonderful brand that we can have here, the Food Island, that shouts purity and healthy and sustainable food. We have to look at profit margins and not just farm gate receipts, because if you look at the way that farm gate receipts have gone over the last few years, they are increasing dramatically. But if you look at actual profit margins, they are shrinking, which means that farmers are working hard to produce more crops, to get more money, for higher gate receipts without actually ending up with more money in their pockets. There's something really wrong with that picture. We have to look at how we can get more dollars per acre into the farmers' pockets, not more dollars per acre out to the suppliers and the integrated chains which take so much of the money out of farmers' pockets. We have to look at land values and how that is such a barrier of preventing new farmers. And there are ways that government could, if it so choose, get involved in the real estate bubble which is currently on Prince Edward Island. Vacancy taxes, for example. Proper adherence to the Land Protection Act, and deposits, raising deposits to try and prevent speculative investment in both housing and land here on Prince Edward Island. These are all ways that government could truly influence the marketplace and make things affordable, not just for new farmers, but for islanders looking to buy homes and to settle here on Prince Edward Island. We also have to maintain local infrastructure, abattoirs, storage, processing facilities, all of those things that are critical parts of the supply chain that if they are absent from Prince Edward Island, farmers do not have all of those necessary links to get their produce from the ground to the marketplace. So we need to maintain that local infrastructure. Insurance programs, there's been so much said already this afternoon in the budget discussion about the deficiencies in our insurance programs here and how they are really not working as they should for farmers. We have to look at global marketplace and subsidies and protections and tariffs. We now spend, well, some people estimate it's over $1 trillion a year in subsidies. $700 billion a year is the more oft-quoted figure. That's $2 billion a day in agricultural subsidies, $1 million a minute, $1 million a minute in public money to support agriculture. And much of that is not done in ways that make agriculture more sustainable or more productive or indeed more profitable, but it actually is driving the climate crisis and destroying wildlife and habitat and destroying small farms. We really need to look at the way the global marketplace distorts the market in the subsidies and protections and tariffs that it puts in place. And PEI does have an opportunity to not, of course, escape from that global marketplace, but to protect ourselves to a much greater extent by supporting that local and regional produce that I talked about earlier. We have to also look at labor costs and availability and succession planning. New farmers coming in to buy land and farms these days, I mean, the cost is just astronomical. And when you cannot look ahead and be sure that you're going to have a return on that investment, it's very difficult for anybody other than somebody who is attached to deep pockets to actually become a new farmer here on Prince Edward Island. We need homesteaders, we need new farmers here. And again, government can do something about that. All three parties were in favor of creating a land bank here, and we have seen, unfortunately, to date, no progress on that. That's 10 parts of separate facets of economics and agriculture that have a profound effect on farming here. I want to give my colleague an opportunity to speak before I sit down. So after I sit down, I should say. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. Absolutely not. That's what it means for agriculture to be truly sustainable. The point of this motion is to generate debate, get the ideas out there, illuminate the problems that we have, and they're critical problems. And the future of farming here on PEI is critical in so many ways. So if we collaborate with farmers and farming organizations, with secondary producers and with rural residents and communities, and with other stakeholders, as well as with those who consume food grown here, and there are more and more people who want to know that their food is safe and healthy and comes from a place where it is grown sustainably, we can develop a strategy here for sustainable agriculture that will increase the well-being of the people, of our land, and of this island as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford, the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to second this motion from the Leader of the Official Opposition, and it's always a pleasure for me to rise to talk about agriculture. And I'm going to go down memory lane for a moment, if that's okay, because my childhood memories are about playing tag with my cousins in the hayloft. It's about, playing cops and robbers, hide and go seek, watching my cousin fall down through the hole in the hayloft down below and hoping that he was okay, and he was. But that's kind of what farming means to me. It's where all my cousins went and bonded and grew really strong family attachment to each other. I used to live 3 fields over from my grandma. My grandmother lived on the farm, and we'd get the phone call that Nanny had just baked bread. And so the race was across the fields to go, because there was fresh homemade bread, which was always ready for whenever my cousins came in from working on the farm. And one of my cousins used to cut out a hole at the end of the loaf of bread, and he used to reach in and take all the bread from inside because he didn't like the crusts. And he used to pull it all out, and then he'd put that piece back in so my grandmother never knew, so she'd cut the loaf of bread, and it was a hollow piece of hollow loaf of bread. And you'd always just get chuckles, but you're always welcome on the farm. And that was our gathering place. There was always somebody there. It was my first job. I worked in the strawberry fields. My cousins used to have a large acreage of strawberry fields, and people would say, "Are you with the Beaton's Berries?" And so it was my first job ever. Picked strawberries, and I wasn't a very good picker, but that was okay. My grandmother never let me pick the raspberries because those are way harder to pick. And it was always great when my dad came out to the field, because I always knew he was going to come behind me and pick me a couple of crates and make it look good, that I'd have lots of stamps at the end of the day. So then I got promoted to be a crater, which meant I took all the boxes that everybody else picked and I put them into the crates and got them ready for the truck, because I wasn't a very good picker, Mr. Speaker, and I readily acknowledge that. But it's where many of my memories are growing up, and it's where my heart is. And it's, I've spent many hours listening to my dad talk about agriculture and talking about his dad working the farm and his grandfather working the farm. And the point of this story is, it's the generational impact and how impactful it is, not just on families and bringing your cousins together and bringing your kids closer to your grandparents, but it's how you bring the whole community together. Because I'll tell you one thing, there's one thing my Uncle Owen knew, that was every single one of his neighbors. And he had so many cups of tea in the run of a day, but it was always the farmer, like it was always him that knew so much about what was going on in the community and supported the community. Agriculture is, it's the hub of our communities, especially our rural communities, and keeping our families together and keeping them going. And what I want for my daughter is to be able to go and play hide and go seek in the haylofts. And I want agriculture to be sustainable, so that's something that continues generation after generation. And it's the work that we do now that's going to ensure that we will see agriculture last and hopefully thrive. I've talked a lot about, agriculture when it came to my response from the speech to the throne, and when we talked about the response to the budget. And I've talked about the importance of livestock. And I can share that I lived in a rural community. It's not as rural as it used to be anymore because of a lot of amalgamation of communities, and we've seen a lot of sprawl happen, and pretty close to the border now of Stratford. So I'm not necessarily rural anymore, but I was. And there used to be a time where every field was full of livestock, and it's not anymore. We have one cattle farmer on the road, and we've got an alpaca farm on the road, and lots of horses, but we're seeing that dwindle. And so the importance of livestock to the whole culture of agriculture is so important, and we need to ensure that we're growing that as well as ensuring that other sustainable agriculture is happening, and that that whole evolution of in growing the right crops and raising the livestock, and it just continues. Technology. I mean, one thing that we've seen with agriculture is it drives change in technology. So right now, since COVID happened and a lot of issues with workers, and is the fact that we're seeing now the machinery the machinery companies actually taking over and doing autonomy in their farming, like in their tractors and spreaders and seeders, and we're actually seeing them making advancements so that to take care of the labor issue, because we have a severe labor issue here in the province. So, Mr. Speaker, and I know it's time that we're going to change over, so I'm going to adjourn debate. Seconded by the Summerside South Drive.
Shall it carry? The honourable member from Morel, Donna, and the government house leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that motion 20 be now called.
Shall it carry?
Motion number 20, Fertility Support Program. The motion has been read and debate was adjourned by the member for Charlottetown Belvedere.
The honourable member from Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise to continue to speak on this motion. When last I spoke, I had raised an important point regarding this motion that recognizes that families that are perhaps in need of fertility support may not be comprised solely of what we would consider a traditional heteronormative family. In fact, it is more likely that families that don't fit that model are also in need of fertility supports. And so that includes families that may be made up of different gender groupings and including, Mr. Speaker, single parents. So a family can be a parent of one. And I think that's something that we need to be careful of when we're thinking about language and inclusivity, that we make sure that the program doesn't presume as to who might be seeking this really important treatment. And as someone who had my daughter late in life, I am always grateful that other families have the opportunity to be able to experience what I have, which is a family that doesn't look the same as everybody else's, that maybe didn't happen in the same time frame that everybody else's do, but it is still valued and recognized as a family nonetheless. One of my daughter's favorite movies is a great Disney movie called Lilo and Stitch in that one is a very odd-looking little alien, but he has to learn about what it's like to be loved and valued. And one of the things he learns is something called ohana, and that means that family is the most important thing, and families can look like a lot of different things. So that's something I really wanted to finish that thought, Mr. Speaker, was about what we think of when we think of families and why they're so important. There's a couple of things I wanted to address, Mr. Speaker, in the motion, though, that I do feel are perhaps something that we need to explore a little further, recognizing that this is an instance of one of many different kinds of specialist healthcare which is not available in PEI. And that's reasonable and understandable. There are a number of very specialist and expensive services that, due to our population size and the capacity we have and the challenges we have in our healthcare system, that we can't provide those here. It's not cost effective, there isn't enough of that support, or we can't manage to make that a priority in our budget. Whatever the reason may be, there are a shocking number of healthcare services that require islanders to leave the province. I think you've probably all in this House heard from constituents who are having to do the mad dash when they need to leave PEI for a specialty service, that they need to go and come back in the same day so they don't need to quarantine. Or that they're having to take a loved one to go and have a service and they're dropping them off at the door and they can't go in with them because under COVID, that's what happens, right? You're taking somebody for something that might be a bit scary, but you have to leave them at the door because if you get out of the car, then you're going to need to quarantine too. And that's brought a whole extra level of challenge. But this is the day-to-day for islanders who are having to do things that they can't afford to put off until later. So some of this are things like healthcare, for instance, for a constituent who has a 6-year-old daughter who, due to a birth defect in her heart, has a pacemaker fitted. And because she's growing, her pacemaker needs to be literally adjusted and changed regularly as she grows up. She has to go to IWK every 6 months to have that tested and assessed. And that costs the family every time that they leave to do that. It costs the family in terms of the time they have to take off work to take her, the cost to go. The procedure is not something that can be done quickly because the child has to be monitored, so they have to stay over. So then when they come back, one of the parents who chooses to go then has to self-isolate, which means they're off work. That is a significant but necessary disruption for that family and carries some significant costs. Another example, Mr. Speaker, is someone who we've heard from in this House on more than once in committee and by speaking, and that's our friend Hunter, who suffers, he lives with admirably and bravely with cystic fibrosis. And he's been in this House in committee advocating for better supports for those with cystic fibrosis. And Mr. Speaker, his therapy that he needs to be able to maintain his lung function has to happen in Halifax because there is no cystic fibrosis clinic here in PEI. That's probably a topic for another day, but that's the reality of it right now. He's not been able to go and get that therapy, and as a result, he has lost lung functionality. We don't have a way to provide that for him. I've got many stories, Mr. Speaker, and I think that some of my colleagues and I have been collecting those stories and we'll probably be bringing forward a motion or even questions for the Minister of Health, so here's a heads up, that there's a lot to talk about the cost and the impact of off-island delivery of services. My point on this, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to this motion, is while I recognize how important it is that is an aspect of cost to delivery of this service, it is an aspect of cost for a whole bunch of other islanders too. And we need to be fair and equitable when we deliver services to islanders. And that if we advocate for one group of islanders to get something, are we making sure that we are providing that same level of service to the other islanders who need it too? I would argue that life-changing or life-sustaining therapies, medical interventions, things that can actually directly improve quality of life, are as critical to receive funding support for travel, cost of work, missed work opportunity, etc., as the ability for somebody to travel and get fertility treatment. So I think it's really important, Mr. Speaker, that we are mindful of the experiences of others that may not be front of mind all the time, and that when we speak about, in this case, what is, again, an optional but very important medical procedure, that group is not the only group that's experiencing a hardship with moving forward with something like that, which requires them to go off island. The other point on this, Mr. Speaker, just to raise is again, in terms of consistency, it's something I've talked about a lot, and many of my other colleagues have as well, regarding the consistency of delivery of services. If we deliver a service to one group of islanders which sets a level for inclusion or exclusion around something like income, for example, we need to make sure that we're doing the same thing in other areas as well, or that it makes sense why we set those barriers or levels. And I was quite surprised when I saw the financial limits that were set in terms of eligibility for this program, because frankly they're really high compared to just about any other program that we have out there where eligibility is set either on an income which is related to the poverty level or is related to market basket measure, for example, but also in other cases where you are not able to access that after you earn a certain amount. And certainly a lot of our other programs that deliver grants and services, you cannot get them once you earn over a certain amount, and that amount is less than $50,000, Mr. Speaker. So I'm a little concerned when I see a financial benchmark that's being set that isn't in alignment with some of the other ones. I would argue that we should increase those allowances up to be more in line with this one. But Mr. Speaker, it is something that we need to think about, that it was raised at the time when this program was rolled out, and it has been raised consistently over and over again. Why is this program an exception rather than the rule? And leveling up would be a great way to resolve that. I think overall, Mr. Speaker, when I look at this program, we know that there's been long continued pressure from the community to have fertility options available to islanders, and I applaud government for making that happen and for putting money where their mouth is. I think it's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that at the same time we do not see an overall wellness strategy for women. We do not see a commitment to providing contraception for those who don't want to start a family yet, Mr. Speaker. We don't see a commitment to sexual and reproductive health in terms of curriculum, outreach, and supports that are available for all people, regardless of where their socioeconomic status, Mr. Speaker. And we don't yet have a midwifery program to support those families so that when they do get pregnant, they have options in terms of how and when they can choose to have that pregnancy be a fulfilling and healthy one, Mr. Speaker. So our overall wellness strategy cannot be a series of small funding announcements that meet specific needs without looking at overall wellness. Most of these other pieces, Mr. Speaker, are not things that require significant investment of funds, but they do require political will. They require a coordination of strategy, and they require recognition that, like anything, these things are complex. They connect to other aspects of our society, and if we don't start taking the people in our community who advocate for that full holistic approach, we don't start taking them seriously, we're going to continue to have to sort of move the deck chairs around afterwards when we announce a program like this, because we have to fix it after the fact rather than getting it right the first time round. I'd like to thank my colleagues for bringing this motion forward, and I'd really urge my colleagues in the House to consider some of the more kind of implementation aspects that we could do to make this even better, and not just this program, but other things that we offer, Mr. Speaker, that enrich the lives of islanders. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a parent here in the Legislative Assembly, as any parent in here would say, being a parent is absolutely the most rewarding job there is. I count my blessings every day. I just have to look at my children, and I know what's important, and they provide me with inspiration, and I just can't say enough about those joys in terms of being a parent. And I can't imagine my life without them. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to describe a fairly personal experience for me, and hopefully it helps me, describe to this House the importance of this program for me and for all Islanders, and this personal experience that I shared with the public, what that did for me in terms of constituents and Islanders reaching out. So, Mr. Speaker, I had my first child back in 2016. He's now 5 years old. Little William, a wonderful pregnancy. I was so fortunate that I had a great pregnancy, a great delivery, a healthy child, everything and more that I could wish for. Mr. Speaker, we always knew we wanted more children. In fact, I always envisioned my life with 4 or 5. I don't know if that necessarily will be the case, but certainly starting out, I thought that my life would. I was just meant to be a mom, and a mom of many. Come April 2017. I was pregnant. I was about 7 weeks pregnant, and the pregnancy was going along well. No problems. I thought, since I'd had the first pregnancy without any major hiccups outside of, some gestational diabetes, so on and so forth, that it was going to be a very positive experience, and hopefully a healthy baby would come out of it. Mr. Speaker, in April 2017, I experienced some pain, some cramps. It was the first trimester. A lot of these symptoms, they are fairly normal in the first trimester. I went to the ER because I knew my body was telling me something was wrong. They did a bedside ultrasound, and at that point, and they weren't sure if everything, they just weren't sure of the health of the baby, so they had sent me for a fetal ultrasound. So the next day, I went back, had the ultrasound, and they found a heartbeat. Everything was fine. 7 weeks in, everything was fine. Mr. Speaker, I went home, still didn't feel right, but as per the professionals in the ER department, everything was fine. The baby was okay. I spent the next couple of days sort of resting, relaxing, trying to take care of myself, trying to take care of my toddler, trying to take care of my fetus, and a couple of days later, still didn't feel right, but I did decide I was going on a trip to New Brunswick, and I did decide to go with my family, and anyway, we stopped in Sussex, New Brunswick, and I felt awful, and I miscarried in New Brunswick. It was the most emotional experience I've ever had. I knew of so many families who had experienced the same. I never thought it could happen to me personally, especially since I had that first successful birth. But I went through an incredible amount of emotions and ups and downs, and I really didn't at that point really share it with a lot of people. I sort of mourned the grief of that. Mr. Speaker, with my family, of course. Mr. Speaker, last October, I was in this role as Minister responsible for the status of women, and I felt it was Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day, and I felt it was a good opportunity to share my story, and I'm so glad I did, because when I did, I posted on social media, so many people reached out to me to describe their experiences with fertility, and it was a moment of being extremely vulnerable, but I think it's so important for us in these roles, and I commend so many of my colleagues who have put themselves in these vulnerable states, because I think that's when we really, when we open ourselves up, that's when we, I feel constituents and Islanders are able to then open themselves up to us and share their stories. And again, I'm so glad that I did that, and the conversations and that I had following that day are remarkable. And as Minister responsible for the status of women, I sit at that cabinet table every day, and I advocate on behalf of women. And most certainly, I did prior to last October around fertility supports. But I have to say, after that day, to me, this became extremely personal, even that much more so, because the reality is after I had the miscarriage, I didn't know if I was going to be able to have other children. I was exploring other options. I'm so very grateful I was able to have my second boy, Henry, but my mind went into some of the worst places, and I knew that if I got to that point, I would need to explore other options because I was so committed to having more children. Anyway, I just want to tell this House that we still have far to go on this. I think that a lot of the concerns and questions raised here regarding this motion, I think they're extremely valid. I am really proud of our government for rolling out a program that will support families, will support women in their journey to start a family. I understand that COVID has provided additional stresses on all of us, and especially people who want to start or continue their fertility journey. But I think that we have come a long way from where we are, and I am looking forward to continue to be a strong advocate for any woman, any family who wants to pursue parenthood, because it is the greatest gift that I've ever been given. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, Mr. Speaker, I'd certainly like to thank the members who brought this motion forward. And as the Minister of Health and Wellness, it's my pleasure to speak to the motion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many islanders have experienced various challenges in starting or growing their families. This has led them to embark on a fertility journey full of uncertainties and challenges, emotionally, financially, and physically. And Mr. Speaker, reducing barriers to fertility services and supports for islanders who wish to grow their families is extremely important. And just for example, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out that under the fertility services and treatments that are provided through the Department of Health and Wellness and through Health PEI, that islanders of all genders, orientations, and ages can receive reproductive and sexual health care, Mr. Speaker. Also, that there is support for islanders in need of fertility-related services, and even prior to the announcement and the increased funding that our government put in place here earlier this year, even prior to that, Mr. Speaker, Health PEI did cover the cost of associated medical workups. And when I say that, it refers to such things as blood work, semen analysis, diagnostic tests such as SHG and ultrasound. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out, too, that the wait times for these initial assessments in the Women's Wellness Program is approximately 1 month, Mr. Speaker. So that, Mr. Speaker, is why in November of 2020, our government announced the Fertility Support Program, which launched on January 1st of this year. Mr. Speaker, the new program provides assistance to islanders who are accessing in vitro fertilization, or IVF, intrauterine insemination, or IUI, at out-of-province clinics, and associated prescribed medications, Mr. Speaker, are also covered. The program, the program provides a minimum of $5,000 and up to $10,000 annually based on family income for eligible expenses associated with both IUI and IVF. An individual can access maximum annual funding for up to a 3-year period, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, since its launch, we are pleased to have had 23 islanders apply for the program to receive assistance in their fertility journey. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of this program has been described as a monumental step in the right direction by fertility advocates. But, Mr. Speaker, we are always looking at ways we can continue to support these individuals and couples. COVID-19 has added more challenges to those going through a fertility journey. Mr. Speaker, we are pleased that those who require these off-island services, who can do so in one day, are able to do a day trip without needing to self-isolate upon return. And Mr. Speaker, if the visits require more time in another province, then these individuals, however, do need to self-isolate when they can return to Prince Edward Island. Mr. Speaker, we are always looking at ways to improve programs and services across the health system, and the fertility support program is certainly no different. We are looking at options for contingency plans to help Islanders receive the care they need, despite what the travel circumstances may be. We are extremely pleased, Mr. Speaker, to offer assistance so it will ease the financial burden for those accessing fertility services. And Mr. Speaker, we are always looking to reduce barriers and remove obstacles for Islanders accessing important health services. And Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to support this motion and look forward to further work on this file. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion before I go to the mover to close debate? No? I'll call on the honourable member from Charlottetown, Winslow, to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I do want to thank all the members for giving their remarks. And I also want to thank all of the constituents and all of the people who did reach out to me to bring this to my attention and put it into a greater light. Mr. Speaker, I do want to thank the seconder of the motion, who I thought made some very good points. Whereas, first of all, the comment that you made, that people would pay anything. And I do appreciate the minister and his department looking into to make this program the best possible program for every possible Islander. I also, Mr. Speaker, wanted to thank the member from Charlottetown, Belvedere, for making it, because again, we've heard the conversation that sometimes it's tough for couples but they have someone to rely on, and they can kind of take that burden together, whereas with a single parent, it can be a very tougher situation to do on your own. I also wanted to thank the Minister of Education for sharing her personal story again with the House. My wife and I went through a very similar situation after the birth of our first child, and that's the one thing, and it was brought up earlier, I believe, in question period, Mr. Speaker, that sometimes Islanders or sometimes people in general just don't want, they don't want to share their stories because for whatever reason that is, maybe it's embarrassment, or maybe they feel like they are the only people, Mr. Speaker, that are going through that type of situation. So I do thank the Minister of Education for sharing that story, because again, there are so many people, and I do invite all Islanders, whatever issue that they're having, that they do share it, because there are other people out there who have the exact same situation. And I also do want to thank the Minister of Health and Wellness for the update with 23 Islanders. I think that it's great to hear that Islanders are taking, not taking advantage, sorry, but they are taking this program, and they are taking the initiative to search into it. As I mentioned in the motion, Mr. Speaker, with the bubble opening, I do ask the department continue to look, because again, with the delays that were in place when the pandemic was still going on, we do know that there will probably be those continued delays when the bubble does in fact open up. And I mentioned that the motion was twofold initially in my remarks. One, of course, was the increased awareness for the awareness of this fertility support program. And the second is the access because of the pandemic still delays. And the third, Mr. Speaker, this was the first motion that I did bring forward as an MLA. So I do appreciate all of the members, first of all, joining in on the debate and, of course, giving me this opportunity to bring forward my first motion. And I do ask that you do please support this motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, honorable members, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. Honorable member, your motion passed unanimously. Honorable member from Morel Dona and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that motion 32 be now read.
Shall it carry?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I seek unanimous consent of the House for motion 32 to be now read.
Honorable members, do we have unanimous consent? Yes. Honorable member, you have unanimous consent.
Motion 32. The honourable member from Charlottetown Winslow moves, seconded by the honourable member from Morel Dona, the following motion. Whereas student well-being teams were first introduced into island schools in 2017, and whereas student well-being teams draw together the expertise of a range of allied professionals to support the mental, social, and physical health of island students, and whereas student well-being teams now operate in all families of schools, and whereas student well-being teams now work one-on-one with over 1,000 island students directly providing supports, and whereas there are opportunities to further enrich and enhance the services and supports from student well-being teams, therefore be it resolved that this Assembly applaud the work of student well-being teams to support the mental, social, and physical health of island students, and therefore be it further resolved that this Assembly encourage the province to explore avenues to further the positive impact of student well-being teams for island students and their families by leveraging the power of parental supports.
The honorable member from Charlottetown Winslow to start debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is again a pleasure to rise today and to move this motion on the student well-being teams. It was great, Mr. Speaker, during question period for the seconder of the motion to bring about the questions in question period on such an important thing. The student well-being teams. The students, of course, these days are facing more challenges than they've ever, and to navigate their way through this world and through this pandemic. I've been lucky enough to be a member of the Education and Economic Development Committee and the member from Charlottetown Victoria Park who chairs this committee, Mr. Speaker. When we were working on our work plan, I brought forward the idea if we could come and hear from the student well-being teams to come in and to present to the committee, and it was great that the chair of the committee was very excited for this as well. I think we do share a lot of similarities with education. Of course, my wife is a school teacher, and of course, as the House knows, Mr. Speaker, I'm a parent of school-age children, so it's...
Honourable members, the hour has been called.
Oh, good.
Honourable member, can you adjourn debate with the seconder?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I adjourn debate, seconded by the member from Montague-Kilmere.
Thank you. Shall I carry? The honourable member from Morel Dona and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Cornwall Meadowbanks, that this House adjourn until Wednesday, March 24th at 1 o'clock in the PM.
Shall I carry?
Do you like that?
Have a good evening, everyone.